It's 9:59 a.m. when a man is jolted awake in his bed by a powerful, mysterious force. While he's trying to figure out what's going on, a giant 100-foot-tall column of water is already surging toward his hometown. In 20 minutes, most of his friends and family members will lose their lives when a sky-high wall of water sweeps away buildings, trees, and cars. And it can happen to you at any given time. It's the day after Christmas in 2004. Thousands of tourists from Europe and America are enjoying tropical beaches in Thailand, Sri Lanka, and Indonesia when a powerful undersea earthquake strikes off the western coast of northern Sumatra, Indonesia. It's a 9.3 magnitude earthquake, the most powerful ever recorded in Asia. It triggers one of the largest tsunamis in history, the Boxing Day tsunami, which will take the lives of 230,000 people within a few hours. The city of Banda Aceh in Sumatra, Indonesia, home to 260,000 people, is the closest to the earthquake's epicenter. In less than half an hour after the quake, huge 10-story tall waves crash into the city. More than 60,000 people lose their lives immediately. The destruction is so severe that almost no one in its path survives. Next, the tsunami hits Thailand. The waves, rushing at a mind-boggling 500 miles per hour across the Indian Ocean, reach the shores of Phang Nang and Phuket about 90 minutes later. Despite such a significant time gap, both locals and tourists are caught totally off guard. Many beachgoers even walk out onto the beach, curious about the strangely receding sea, only to be overtaken by a towering wall of water. Nearly 5,400 people, including 2,000 foreign tourists, won't survive that day in Thailand. An hour after Thailand, the tsunami hits southeastern India near Chennai. Debris-filled waves push miles inland, taking the lives of more than 10,000 people. Sri Lanka faces even worse devastation. The island will lose over 30,000 people, and hundreds of thousands will become homeless. The tsunami's incredible strength is evident even far away. 8 hours later, it claims its last victims in South Africa, 5,000 miles from the quake's epicenter. There, rogue waves catch swimmers off guard. Researchers from NOAA's Center for Tsunami Research explain that the destruction was due to the sheer power of the earthquake. It originated from a megathrust fault. That's where heavy ocean plates dive beneath lighter continental plates. These faults are the largest in the world and lie underwater. The 2004 earthquake ruptured a 900-mile stretch of the Indian and Australian plates, 31 miles beneath the seafloor. Plus, instead of one quick jolt, the quake lasted for 10 minutes and released an unimaginable amount of energy. During the shaking, massive sections of the seafloor moved upwards by 130 feet. That's a lot. Such a sudden movement set colossal waves rippling across the ocean. Imagine it like dropping a massive pebble into the water. The thing is, tsunami waves aren't like those surfing waves you may imagine. No, they look like a fast-moving whitewater river that floods everything in its way. If you get caught in those raging waters, it's almost impossible to survive. If the powerful currents don't pull you under, floating debris will. That's the reason why, during earthquakes, there are usually many injuries and fewer lives lost. With tsunamis, it's the opposite. There's way fewer injuries than fatalities because it's too hard to survive. Catastrophic tsunamis, like the one in 2004, are rare. That's why India and Sri Lanka had no record of such disasters. This lack of experience, combined with the absence of warning systems, made the consequences of the disaster even more tragic. People didn't feel the earthquake because they were far from the epicenter. And with no natural warning signs, no official alerts, and no history of tsunamis, the waves that hit crowded coastlines had devastating effects. By the way, the Pacific Ocean, the largest ocean on Earth, is where most earthquakes and tsunamis occur. Locally damaging tsunamis strike somewhere in this ocean about once every 1 to 2 years. 76% of the recorded fatal tsunamis happened in the Pacific. And 99% of tsunami casualties are caused by local or regional tsunamis, which occur more often and hit quickly. But then a question arises. Could a tsunami as devastating as the Boxing Day one happen again? Unfortunately, the answer isn't very straightforward. A warning system has indeed been established in the Indian Ocean. Its goal is to alert coastal nations of potential tsunamis. But human behavior is still a critical challenge. This became clear during a real-life test in 2012. That's when many residents of Banda Aceh, Indonesia, simply ignored evacuation towers after a tsunami warning. People never seem to learn, huh? The Indian Ocean Warning Network uses undersea pressure sensors placed near tectonic plate fault lines. These sensors detect any changes and transmit data to surface buoys, which then send it via satellite to control centers on land. Authorities analyze the information and decide whether to issue warnings and evacuate at-risk areas. Aceh, located on one of the world's most active fault lines, implemented additional safeguards. They installed sirens in coastal cities, and people get alerts on their cell phones. Plus, there are evacuation towers, reinforced concrete structures capable of holding 500 people. They are special safe zones. Authorities did test how well prepared people were. In 2009, 18 Indian Ocean countries participated in an evacuation drill, simulating a large earthquake. Thousands of coastal communities took part in this drill, and officials concluded that the exercise had been a success. Fast forward to the system's first real test in April 2012. An 8.6 magnitude undersea earthquake west of Aceh triggered tsunami warnings. And even though there were no significant waves, the whole situation revealed critical flaws. Many residents ignored evacuation towers, choosing instead to flee by car or motorbike. This led to citywide traffic jams, with people getting stranded in areas vulnerable to a potential tsunami. It was chaos. Some residents even went back to the beach to look for the signs of a tsunami, which is a life-threatening mistake. So apparently, there is still a lot of work to do when it comes to tsunami survival. But what you need to know by heart is the signs of an impending tsunami. First of all, it's severe ground shaking. Strong earthquakes near coastal areas can generate tsunamis. If you notice that water on the beach starts to recede at an alarming rate, exposing the ocean floor, reefs, and stranded fish, run. Then there might be unusual ocean sounds. Keep in mind that a loud roaring noise, resembling a train or jet engine, may accompany an approaching tsunami. If you notice any of these warning signs, do not wait for official evacuation orders. Leave low-lying coastal areas immediately and move to higher ground as fast as possible. If you're at home, make sure your family members know about the tsunami and follow official guidance. You should remember that locally generated tsunamis may strike within minutes. You have to act quickly. If it's a distant tsunami, you may have more time to evacuate. If you don't have an opportunity to move inland, hide in high reinforced concrete buildings. Avoid staying in small buildings or homes in low-lying areas. If you're on a boat, stay offshore. Tsunami activity isn't as dangerous in deep water, so avoid returning to port during a tsunami warning. If you're already in port, check with harbor authorities for guidance. If it's possible to move to deep water, do it in an orderly manner. It may be safer for small boat owners to leave their vessel and move to higher ground. And always, prioritize moving to higher ground over saving your belongings. If you live in a coastal area, you can take some measures to protect your property in advance. Since most tsunami waves are under 10 feet, you may consider elevating your house. It can reduce damage. You can also consult an engineer to assess and reinforce your home. And finally, don't forget to protect outbuildings too, and create fences that will allow animals to reach higher ground. It's been there for over 3 billion years, but now some of the Earth's oldest crust is falling apart. Today, our continents seem stuck in place, but over a long time, they've moved and shifted around a lot. It's all thanks to tectonic activity, which makes part of Earth's surface slowly slide around like pieces of a giant puzzle. Some of the most stable parts of these puzzle pieces are called cratons. Cratons are super old and strong sections of rock that form the roots of continents and keep them together. The North American craton is one of them. It makes up a big part of the United States, about half of Canada, and most of Greenland. Scientists have singled out about 35 of these big ancient cratons around the world. They mostly stayed in the same place for hundreds of millions of years because of how strong they are. But in 2014, they discovered that cratons might not be as indestructible as they thought. Some cratons had lost parts of their strong roots because of certain geologic processes and became thinner. It looks like cratons could become less stable if they go through more tectonic changes. In 2024, scientists at China University of Geosciences analyzed an ancient landmass called the North China Craton, or NCC for short. They wanted to learn more about how some of Earth's oldest rock regions can break apart. This process of cratons disintegrating is called decratonization. The NCC is so interesting to study because it has three main parts: the Western Bloc, the Eastern Bloc, and the Trans-North China Orogen, a zone that lies between the two blocks. Scientists found that during the Mesozoic era, the Eastern Bloc lost its deep ancient roots because of the strong Earth movements called tectonomagmatic events. So scientists wanted to see exactly how the processes in the mantle and the movements of Earth's plates led to the breaking down of the NCC. They created 4D models showing how the NCC's shape changed over time, including its surface shape, how its layers stretched, and the way earthquake waves moved through it. They found that a section of the tectonic plate slid beneath the craton and then began to roll back. This rolling and stretching made the strong rock thin out and eventually lose stability. All this started around 200 million years ago, back during the Jurassic period, when dinosaurs were rocking the world. The North China Craton isn't the only place where this decratonization process can happen. Other cratons, like those in North America, South America, and China's Yangtze region, may have gone through similar changes. Scientists say this shows how the continents on Earth have slowly changed and evolved over billions of years. And it looks like, when it comes to geology, there's no place that is 100% safe from changes, but it's no cause for alarm. You don't notice this, but our planet never stops moving and is perfectly normal. But sometimes, this movement still brings dramatic changes. In 2017, scientists made an official announcement that Zealandia can be called a new continent. The continental shelves of this mysterious continent are lying at a depth of around 3,280 feet below sea level. The nearest oceanic crust dives even deeper, at 9,800 feet below that. Geologists have gone deep down to collect rocks from the ocean floor. They've found that, unlike the nearby oceanic crust, which is made up of fresh basaltic rocks, the crust around New Zealand is a mix of ancient granite, limestone, and sandstone. All this screams continental crust. Plus, scientists have discovered a narrow strip of oceanic crust that separates Australia from the hidden land of Zealandia. It means these two are separate continents. 85 million years ago, Zealandia decided to break free from the supercontinent Gondwana. Millions of years later, the mighty Pacific Plate, the heavyweight champion of tectonic plates, decided to take a dive beneath Zealandia's continental crust. And that's how the root of Zealandia, that connection to its continental crust, broke off and went into the depths below. And that's not all the tectonic news from this part of the world. 120 million years ago, Australia and Antarctica were a single piece of land. They went their separate ways, but Antarctica didn't leave empty-handed. Today, there's an oceanic plateau in the Indian Ocean. Long ago, it was connected to another lost continent, the Kerguelen microcontinent. Scientists believe that it made a land bridge between India and Antarctica. To find out what it was like, we can look at a tiny archipelago in the southern Indian Ocean. These islands are all that is left of the ancient landmass. They have a cold climate and feature glaciers because they're so close to Antarctica. But in the past, the weather here must have been temperate with plenty of rainfall. The animals and plants would have been similar to those that live in tropical regions today. Another lost and found continent isn't hiding in the ocean, but under Europe. It's called Greater Adria, and it collided with Europe and started to sink under it around 100 million years ago. Today it lies beneath Italy, Greece, and the Balkans. Its size and even shape match that of Greenland, the world's largest island. Greater Adria is no longer visible, but it left some clues. Part of it was embedded in the Alps. The other chunks are part of present-day Italy and Croatia, on the other side of the Adriatic Sea. Limestone rocks from the former continent started to change once they were under the European landmass. Great heat and pressure spread over tens of millions of years changed their structure, and that's when the limestone left the chat and the marble took its place. Greater Adria wasn't a solid piece of land like the big continent we see today, but more like a giant shallow shelf underwater. Over time, sand, mud, and other stuff settled on this shelf and slowly turned into rock. Greater Adria might have been a little like Zealandia or the Florida Keys, a chain of small islands sitting in a shallow sea. Above the water, there were probably lots of little islands and archipelagos, and beneath the waves, there were colorful coral reefs filled with marine life. If you lived back then and had a scuba tank, it would have been an amazing place to dive and explore. So, with all the things going on with the cratons, who knows? We could see a new continent in the future. Plus, studying the Earth's crust even deeper can change history as we know it. Scientists in Copenhagen have made an amazing discovery about the real birthplace of Scandinavia, and it's not where we thought. After studying sand and rock from remote parts of Finland, they found out that Scandinavia's roots actually came from Greenland over 3.75 billion years ago. This means the area where Nordic countries are now is 250 million years older than the scientists had previously believed. And we now know, thanks to the tiny crystals called zircons found in Finnish river sands. When scientists looked closely at their chemical makeup, they realized the age of crystals matched the rocks found in Greenland, not Scandinavia. They used special techniques to analyze elements like uranium, lead, lithium, and hafnium, and discovered that Scandinavia's rocky base most likely broke off from Greenland billions of years ago. A small seed of land probably started drifting across the Earth's surface over hundreds of millions of years. This piece eventually settled where Finland is today. Over time, new layers of rock formed around this seed and slowly turned into the Scandinavia we see on maps now. The same study could help us rethink how the continents on Earth first formed. The most accepted theory is that the continental crust began growing right when the planet was formed. But new studies show that the signs of continents only started growing a billion years later. The scientists explain that Earth's continents may have begun as tiny seeds of ancient crust in different places. These seeds grew over time, forming the landmasses we know today. These ancient seeds aren't just found in Scandinavia, but also in Australia, South Africa, and India. Scientists aren't sure if all these seeds came from the same place or if they grew separately in different parts of the world. So there's still a lot to learn, and scientists need to keep digging to figure out if all these ancient seeds are related to each other. If there were cataclysms on Earth every 5 minutes, living conditions on our planet would be almost the same as 4.5 billion years ago. Back then, seas and oceans boiled, lightning struck everywhere, tectonic plates changed their shape, lava flowed from volcanoes, and worse, no internet. The Earth resembled a vast boiling cauldron where life was gradually being created. If it starts to boil again, this cauldron could destroy almost all life on the planet. Consecutive cataclysms. Won't hurt to pretend. Let's imagine, shall we? Good morning! You wake up in a small underground bunker. The seismic sensor indicates that a 7-point earthquake will start in a few minutes. You pack a huge waterproof backpack and go upstairs. The underground bunker is protected from seismic activity. It moves with the ground, so you're safe here. But you need to leave the shelter because supplies are low. Also, yesterday, you picked up a radio signal telling all survivors to go south immediately. The coordinates they gave aren't far from your location. You have to hurry though, before the landscape changes again. You open the hatch and find yourself in the middle of the desert. The sun is almost invisible beyond the gray sky. The ground is shaking, but you're not afraid. There are no houses or buildings, nothing to fall on you. You keep your balance perfectly, and the earthquake doesn't knock you off your feet. It's like jumping on a trampoline. The only danger is the deep chasms in the ground, but you can easily jump over them. After such an extreme morning warm-up, you decide to have breakfast. You take a tin can out of your backpack. You have a few minutes before the next disaster, so you eat and remember how your great-grandfather told you how all this started. Before all of this, the planet was divided into territories called countries. Millions of people lived in them, and then something terrible happened. The tectonic plates started to move, and the air temperature and atmospheric pressure began to rapidly change. In one day, earthquakes destroyed entire cities. Tsunamis and floods washed away the remaining ruins. Volcanic ash blocked the passage of sunlight. Forest fires destroyed almost all vegetation, and eruptions poisoned the air. Only a few people managed to adapt to such harsh conditions, and you are a lucky duck to be one of them. As you finish your breakfast, you're distracted by another ground tremor. Time to move on. Many people travel around the world alone, as they consider it a safer way of life. Some people form small communes, but no one ever stays in one place for too long. Your whole life is in motion, but you don't panic. One of the main rules during natural disasters is to remain calm, so all survivors have steel nerves and excellent physical training. You run a few miles south and suddenly smell something strange. You put on a gas mask. The earthquake has created a limnic eruption. Natural carbon dioxide is released from the ground to the surface. You feel comfortable in a gas mask, but can't run fast while wearing it. Far up ahead, you see a green forest, a rare place that was not affected by fires. You take off the gas mask and go to the tree to take shelter in the shade from the scorching sun. This green area is rich in vegetation. Colorful flowers, strawberries, and many other berries grow here. But you're concerned. Such fertile land comes from being near volcanoes. It spews underground magma rich in vitamins and minerals, so vegetation grows. You can see a high mountain in the distance. This is the volcano. An underground push occurs again and provokes an eruption. You gather strawberries and run away from this place as far as possible. Lava pours from the volcano's mouth and makes a fire in the forest. You unhook a folding scooter with a motor from your backpack and drive away from the fiery mountain as fast as you can. The sky is covered with volcanic ash, but this is not for long. A strong wind grows with each passing second. You realize a hurricane is moving in your direction. You take out a small shovel and dig a hole in the ground. The soil is dry, but you have enough strength to dig a small ravine in a couple of minutes. You dive into the shelter and cover yourself with a protective tent. The hurricane blows the volcanic ash in different directions, and the air becomes clear again. But the fire doesn't stop. The wind spreads through the forest. You get out of the ravine and put on the gas mask again. There's a lot of smoke around, and it's unbearably hot. You know the hurricane couldn't just appear without any reason. Hurricanes are formed when warm, moist air collides with the sea surface and rises to the sky, so there's water nearby. Great, because you're thirsty and want to cool down. A loud sound erupts behind you. You turn around. A massive wave of water approaches the fire. Without panic, you take your life jacket out of your backpack, remove your gas mask, and put on a diving mask and fins. The wave blows you off your feet, but you don't drown. Over the years of survival, you have learned to swim very well. You grab a passing tree and wait patiently for the flood to be replaced by another natural disaster. For 5 minutes, you sail under a black, stormy sky that sparkles with lightning. Despite the waves, you try to row south. It's getting pretty cold. You finally see the shore, but this is not a land, but ice. A strong wind brought a cold cyclone, which caused a fast temperature change. It's like you're in Antarctica. Snow and blizzards are all around. It's freezing, but you take out a thin space blanket made from foil and walk slowly south. Under your clothes, you put crumpled paper, bubble wrap, pieces of cotton. All this also helps to warm your body. Along the way, you collect several bottles of snow to melt later. Icicles form on your face, and you can't see because of the snowstorm. Suddenly, the snow begins to squish under your feet. The ice melts and turns into water. A hot stream of air blows into your face. You find yourself on hard, dry ground, looking up at the sky, then at your watch. 5 minutes pass, and the sky is again covered with black clouds. You take a metal plate out of your backpack and cover your head with it. A few seconds later, you are hit by heavy rain and hail. Giant balls of ice knock on the metal shield, but you go calmly and even with a smile on your face. The ground becomes wet and loose from icy rocks. When the hail ends, you pull out all the heat-insulating materials from under your clothes and hide them in your backpack. Then you lay out a few long spokes of steel. The spokes are wrapped with copper wire. You connect the spokes to each other, making one long antenna. You stick it in the ground and run away. After the hail from the rain clouds, lightning strikes the ground. More precisely, it hits the lightning rod you've just built. You wait for the storm to end, then take the lightning rod apart and return it to your backpack. An intense heat begins. You drink some melted snow and break your way through the desert. The earth trembles, and your adventure begins again. Earthquakes, carbon dioxide, fires, floods, snowfall, tsunamis, lightning, and again and again and again. With the help of a compass, you continue your journey and reach your goal a few months later. You see a long antenna sticking out of the ground. This is a place mark for entering an underground city. The city is built from dozens of massive bunkers connected to each other by tunnels. The city walls don't allow radiation to pass through, and they don't bend from daily earthquakes. People learn to extract energy from the ground. The Earth's core gives heat. This heat boils water, then steam is formed, and electricity is created at special stations. People get water from underground lakes and rivers. Instead of the sun, ultraviolet lamps are installed everywhere, which provide people and plants with necessary light. Natural disasters happen on Earth every 5 minutes, but humanity still has a lot of space underground. You wake up, gasping for air, struggling to peel yourself from your bed. When you do manage to get your feet on the ground, it feels like they're glued down tight. You're twice as heavy. It feels like you're carrying another you on your shoulders all day long. Well, congratulations. You've woken up on an Earth where uncontrolled experiments with dark matter have doubled the force of gravity. Mass panic happens when over 8,000 aircraft fall as soon as the gravity spikes, crashing into buildings, forests, and oceans. And that's because airplanes suddenly lost the balance between the pull of gravity and the lift force necessary to keep them cruising. Pilots did attempt to save their planes, but GPS failed as satellites swiftly moved. After a month, humans begin to look more and more like chimps. Bones are getting thicker, and the immense force constantly pulling people down is squashing their spines, making everybody bend over. People start figuring out that walking ape-style on all fours helps with better balance and stability. And that becomes a big deal, since even tripping over a tiny rock could lead to a nasty fracture. Falls not only get more intense due to the extra forces on bones and joints, but they also happen faster. Gravity's pull doubles the acceleration force, increasing it from 32 feet per second to 64 feet per second. Your house is not a safe place anymore. Old buildings and bridges all over the world are now collapsing. Inside those still standing, residents get the scary feeling that the whole place is shaking, and cracks start showing up everywhere. It's dangerous to stay inside houses, as roofs are now twice their usual weight, and any rain or snow also feels twice as heavy. Car alarms are constantly going off because tree branches keep falling all over the place. Most trees simply can't bear the weight of gravity, and only strong and small plants survive, like cactuses and succulents. 6 months after the sudden change, supermarkets have a sinister vibe going on, with shelves nearly empty and people arguing over the last loaf of bread. You get frustrated to see that your favorite Japanese restaurant is now 5 times more expensive. And it's not just about salmon prices. It's rice that has become a rare luxury item, since the gravity boost has messed up the photosynthesis process, and the seeds are taking too long to grow. On the flip side, carrots are now cheaper than ever. They're sprouting and growing at lightning speed. People start eating so many carrots that human skin now has an orange glow from all that extra beta-carotene. Farmers are getting creative, using artificial supports to keep plants like tomatoes and corn on their feet. But even with all their efforts, it's hard to get a good harvest. Summer has arrived, and even your air conditioner can't relieve the unbearable heat. A sudden change in gravity disrupted Earth's orbit around the Sun, pushing it into a new, tighter elliptical path. Earth now passes much closer to the Sun than it used to, making your sunscreen simply surrender. The Moon's orbit has also had some dramatic changes, leading to more dangerous and extreme tide patterns. High tides are now higher and low tides are lower. This shift has also triggered widespread volcanic eruptions and earthquakes on an unprecedented scale. Earth's crust starts to rupture across vast areas, unleashing planet-wide lava flows so intense that living on Venus begins to sound like a pretty good idea. 5 years later, people notice that puppies are begging for food twice as much, but they are taking more time to grow. Breeds like beagles look thinner and their leg bones are getting heavier. Even insects, such as locusts, now have thicker hind legs to keep those jumps going. Sea creatures are being crushed by the much greater weight of the water around them. That's not a big deal for animals used to deep ocean pressures, like the anglerfish, but crabs and lobsters are really struggling since they live in shallow waters. Sloths and monkeys develop a stronger grip so they won't fall off trees. For carnivorous animals living in jungles or savannas, life is a real challenge because any animal the size of a wolf or bigger can't run without breaking a leg. Large predators like lionesses are starving because they can't move fast enough to catch their prey. Tall trees like palms and pines also go through evolutionary changes. They get beefier trunks and only grow about half as tall as usual. This way, water and nutrients can travel from the ground up to their leaves without struggling against gravity so badly. 10 years have passed since gravity increased. Airlines have finally made changes to prevent commercial flights from nosediving. The wings of airplanes are now longer. Pilots have learned to fly at altitudes twice as high, and flight speed has increased by 41%. To avoid people getting extremely nauseated and dizzy during takeoffs and landings, seats are now fully horizontal, like first-class bed-like setups, specially designed to minimize the nasty effects of gravity times 2. Flight attendants are trained to raise the seat at the passenger's feet after they pass out, so that blood can return to their head. The thing is, when gravity gets a power boost, it yanks your blood down to your feet and hands even more than usual, making your heart work extra hard to pump that blood around, especially to your head. 50 years have passed. Women in their 30s look like they are 60. Higher gravity decreases collagen synthesis, so even though they're still young, they're dealing with more wrinkles and fine lines, and their skin has already lost a big part of its elasticity. Wounds as small as a pimple pop or a paper cut also take much more time to heal. So people are excited about the creation of a Band-Aid made from fish skin from cod or tilapia that promotes local blood circulation and speeds up the healing process. People have also got used to wear exoskeletons made of titanium, which support and enhance the wearer's strength. This technology features cool joints at the places that copy humans' natural movements, giving people more flexibility and letting them move around more easily. Prototypes of personal flying devices start popping up after 100 years. The Gray Flyer is like a jetpack made of carbon nanotubes, making the structure strong without adding much weight. Instead of using fuel for propulsion, the device has these super-thin but high-tech solar panels. Investors are still not sure if humans could fly long distances with it, but the Gray Flyer definitely can help people tackle tasks that have become almost impossible, like climbing a mountain or grabbing something from the attic. Things at the gym are pretty different too. The anti-gravity treadmill is a favorite among fitness enthusiasts because it uses air pressure to lift users, reducing the discomfort of gravity while running. People can also lift weights in booths when the gravity settings are customized. When training with G-force set at 3 or 4 times the new normal, muscles get stronger, making double gravity seem more bearable. However, the maximum set is 4.6, otherwise bones might crack. Over 500 years have passed. Thanks to these amazing technological creations, humans can now handle and establish colonies in other parts of the universe. A popular choice for family vacations is Kepler 452b, a planet about 60% larger than Earth, orbiting in the habitable zone of a sun-like star. Kids especially like that place, as oceans have been discovered and hotels have been built near rocky beaches. On the other hand, traveling to places in the universe with lighter gravity is like going to an oasis of tranquility. So Mars and the Moon have become known for amazing yoga retreats. With their gravitational forces much weaker, people can breathe more easily there and move around with more freedom. Keep in mind that these trips are expensive, so you might want to start saving up now. The strongest earthquake ever to strike east of the Mississippi River that happened over 200 years ago was never over, according to some scientists. Most earthquakes last seconds to minutes, and the official record breaker so far is a silent one in Sumatra that was going on for 32 years. This slow slip event triggered a massive quake and a tsunami. So if it's true that the New Madrid earthquake is still sending aftershocks, we'll have a new top name for this sad list. The earthquake started in December of 1811 with a powerful quake in a sparsely populated part of northeast Arkansas. They felt the shaking almost 1,000 miles away in the White House, and the tower bells were ringing in Boston, even further away. It even made the mighty Mississippi flow backward for a few minutes over new waterfalls formed by shifted ground. The town of New Madrid, Missouri, completely disappeared in the disaster. The Earth wouldn't stay still until the end of January the following year, when things got serious again. A massive quake hit, this time near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers, right in the Missouri boot heel. Geologists believe it was a rupture on the New Madrid Fault, putting even more strain on the nearby Reelfoot Fault. Just when people thought it couldn't get worse, another 2 weeks of trembling passed, and the Reelfoot Fault snapped deep beneath New Madrid. Down in Tennessee, about 15 miles south of New Madrid, the ground uplift created Reelfoot Lake. Steamboats were chugging along the river, with thousands of trees floating and acres of woods torn apart by the quake. In St. Louis, Missouri, which is 160 miles away, buildings were badly damaged, and chimneys fell in Cincinnati, Ohio, 400 miles away. People all the way in Montreal, Canada, over 1,000 miles away, felt the earthshake. Seismologists have registered about 200 small earthquakes in the New Madrid seismic zone every year since 1974. Some researchers believe that up to 30% of those were aftershocks from those big quakes back in 1811 and 1812. In parts of the U.S. where there's not much tectonic action going on, these aftershocks could keep rumbling for years, maybe even centuries, after the big ones hit. Aftershocks are the Earth's way of releasing all that built-up stress from the main quake. When the ground shakes from the first earthquake, it puts a lot of pressure on the rocks nearby. And when those rocks can't take it anymore, they crack, causing even more shaking. That's the aftershock. And they can be pretty intense, especially right after the main quake, but weaken over time. Not all scientists agree that contemporary earthquakes have to do with those from 200 years ago. We mostly associate faults with those lines where Earth's plates meet. But there's a whole network of those right under the center of the North American plate. They're like relics from 750 million years ago, when North America was part of a supercontinent called Rodinia. When Rodinia started to break up, it left behind these rifts, weak spots in the Earth's crust that run deep beneath the modern Midwest. It could explain the earthquake action. An international team of geologists decided to take a fresh look at 3 major earthquakes that shook North America and end the debate. They used a new math method called the nearest neighbor. It says that if earthquakes are too close in space, time, and magnitude to be independent background events, then one is assumed to have triggered the other. Depending on how you look at the numbers, somewhere between 10 to 65% of the recent quakes in the region could be aftershocks of those historic earthquakes. And a huge quake that hit Charleston, South Carolina at the end of the 19th century might explain up to 72% of the earthquakes in the area since then. But not all places are the same, so the scientific debate continues. In 1774, British explorer James Cook noticed a glow in the distance. It was the volcano of Mount Yasur in Vanuatu. This bad boy had been spewing lava and ash ever since, and it's quite likely that it's been doing that for way longer. The volcano has been sitting at alert level since October 2016, which means things are really unsettled around there. They've even marked off a 2,000-foot radius around the crater to keep people safe. There have been low to moderate outbursts, shooting out ash, gas, and steam, and some bigger blasts throwing stuff outside the crater. Satellite images have picked up on some hot spots of sulfur dioxide plumes, showing that Yasur is still cooking up a big storm down there. Stromboli, one of the volcanic islands near Sicily, officially has the Guinness World Record as the longest continuously erupting volcano. It has been putting on a fiery show for over 2,400 years straight. Ancient sailors nicknamed it the Lighthouse of the Mediterranean. Most of the time, Stromboli's just spitting out spatter, but every now and then it throws in some lava flows or shoots up some moderately high fountains. Sometimes you might even catch a glimpse of steam-driven outbursts. Over 200 million years ago, the world went through a major makeover, with not one, not two, but 4 massive volcanic eruptions changing the game. It all happened in Rensselaer, a large chunk of island that used to be a supermassive volcano stretching across what's now British Columbia and Alaska. This volcanic activity might have helped dinosaurs grow from cat-sized critters into giants we saw in Jurassic Park. It kicked off a 2-million-year rainy season. It made the whole world hot and humid, and the dinos just loved it. Researchers dug deep into sediment layers beneath an ancient lake in China to uncover these secrets. They found traces of volcanic ash and mercury, clear signs of those epic eruptions. There were carbon signatures showing huge spikes in carbon dioxide levels, making the atmosphere toasty and the rain pouring down. It all happened in 4 separate pulses, each triggered by those monstrous volcanic blasts. There's a spot in a national park not too far away from Sydney, Australia, where a fire has been raging deep underground for at least 6,000 years. They call it Burning Mountain, and it's a coal seam fire, burning its way through a layer of coal beneath the Earth's surface. Once these underground fires start, they're pretty much impossible to put out. This ball of fire is up to 30 feet wide and extremely hot, but there's no flame, it's smoldering. The fire has been creeping along at a pace of about 3 feet per year. A local farmer first spotted it in the 19th century and thought it was a volcano. The people who have lived here for ages believe this place is sacred. They've used it for cooking and crafting tools, and tell that it started from a widow's tears or the torch of a hero. But experts think it could have been a lightning strike or coal heating up like a summer barbecue from the interaction with oxygen. Some say it might have been burning since before the dinosaurs roamed the Earth. No one knows exactly how long this mountain will burn or in what direction it'll move. Right now, the coal has enough oxygen to burn for centuries or even millennia without human intervention. The fire is heating up the mountain like a giant oven, making it crack and crumble, inviting in more oxygen to feed on. Even if humans decide to take action, these coal seam fires need truckloads of water and liquid nitrogen to tame them. Several years ago, explorers noticed that the smolder was creeping close to a cliff overlooking a little river. And depending on what the coal seam decides to do next, we could see some dramatic changes here in the coming decades. There could be flames with much more heat, or the coal seam could go deep, extinguish itself, and smolder out. If you live in a hot spot for earthquakes, like I do, you may have had these familiar shaking feelings. The ground trembling underneath you, pictures rattling on the walls, your neighbor's dog yapping across the yard. An earthquake is basically tectonic plates moving and grinding against each other. Rub your hands together really fast right now. Things heating up? That's energy. When these plates' energy get released, you and your neighbor's dog feel it on land. Yes, we're all surfing on giant pieces of land floating on hot liquid rock. You're surfing right now while watching this video. Sometimes one slides under another, like reaching in between the couch cushions for that remote that slipped down there. If you're wearing long sleeves, they get rolled up on your arm like a snake shedding its skin. When plate tectonics do this, mountains form. But let's zoom out from your bedroom. Even further. Keep going. There. Earth, the third planet from the Sun, covered in mountains, canyons, and those familiar continents with oceans stretching between and all around them. But our planet used to have just one single supercontinent, Pangaea, where all the land masses were hugging each other and enjoying the sweet life surrounded by one massive superocean. Africa and Australia were neighbors. The Americas and Asia popped up for a howdy neighbor. But fast forward about 300 million years, and here we are. And there you are, hanging 10 on molten rock as the ground beneath you forms mountains, ridges, volcanoes, and earthquakes. Sounds hardcore, but you don't feel like you're moving, do you? You also don't feel like your body is going highway speeds when you ride in a car. That's physics, and it's a funny thing. Right now, the plate under you is only moving a couple of inches a year, up to 4 when things get super speedy. Per day, that comes to half the width of a strand of hair. So let's speed things up a bit, say 300 feet a day. And me too.
You're sitting in your room enjoying a delicious cup of hot cocoa, scrolling the feed and watching some videos. As you set the mug on the nightstand, you begin to feel dizzy, like the room is spinning. You check your drink and see the liquid inside is swaying like crazy. Uh-oh, now you're swaying. You manage to get up but can't keep your balance. Everything topples over like a tornado in the room. You duck underneath your bed and cover your head. There's a power outage, and now you can't see anything.
There are two things to keep in mind when it comes to earthquakes: magnitude and intensity. Magnitude is the size of the quake. It's just one constant number. Intensity is how much shaking it causes. That number can be different depending on where you're measuring from. The most powerful earthquake ever was in Chile in 1960. Its magnitude measured 9.5 on the Richter scale. Above 7 is considered severe. The quake caused tsunamis all the way to Japan, Hawaii, the Philippines, and even New Zealand. The damage cost millions of dollars in repairs.
In the dark, you can still feel the ground shaking below you. And since the crust cut across 300 feet today, the ground rips open. The landscape where you used to bike around is now sprouting deep earth rocks and minerals. The buildings all around begin to collapse, but luckily, you manage to sneak off and escape into an open space. There isn't any service on your phone either. The cell towers toppled over during the quake, but the ground is still shaking. And with the plates moving so fast, the Earth's interior begins to show its true colors. And that color is red for red hot. You can see the mantle at this point. The Earth, like an onion, is revealing its layers. With magma flowing right in front of you, you'd think you're in a disaster movie. Suddenly, you get a whiff of salty sea air, and now you're standing on the beach. But wait a minute, you don't live by the coast. If an earthquake's strength is measured by magnitude and intensity, this one's a doozy. It probably originated out in the ocean and stretched all the way inland where you are. It caused a tidal wave so big, the coast just came to your landlocked town. Waves of ocean water are gathering near the edges of the city. Farms and rivers are all gone with a single tidal wave. The land that was good for agriculture is no more. And as the ground below you keeps on cutting, it lets in some ocean water between the gaps. It collides with the magma that's rising. Steam shoots up from the ground, and the Earth looks like a giant tea kettle. With the power out and no cell signals, there's no way of communicating with anyone. And that's just the thing with earthquakes. They can show up with hardly any warning.
Unlike earthquakes, tornadoes, and typhoons, with those, we can predict their path and intensity. We can prepare. Even volcanic eruptions give people enough time to evacuate and reach safe ground. But earthquakes are just in a league of their own.
And with all the buildings collapsing around you, you'd be seeing a smokescreen of dust and debris. The air would be unbreathable. Better grab a gas mask. Off in the distance are the mountains you've always enjoyed. You trekked along the trails every other weekend and had some fantastic camping trips along the river. But the earthquake drags across the center of the mountain and creates enough pressure to cut it. Trees start falling over. The mountain becomes a pile of rock and dust. It's not over yet. The shaking ground makes large pieces of land and rock slide down and head towards the town. Some landslides are so massive, they're enough to wipe out entire villages in remote areas. Many come after heavy rain, others come completely unexpected. With the ground opening beneath you, many of the objects on land get swallowed into the pit. Cars, trees, buildings, statues, you name it. You're able to find safe ground, but you can't really know if it's all that safe. All this is happening in your town and places across the globe. But it's about to get even more global.
Plate tectonics are crucial for life on Earth. One of their main duties in a thankless job was maintaining the planet's comfortable, livable temperature. Without land masses floating around on a layer of liquid rock, there'd be no life on the liveliest planet we know so far. A couple of billion years ago, Earth was just a little ice ball. This was because the sun, much younger back then, was colder than it is today. You'd think the oceans would be frozen and good enough to skate from the Atlantic to the Pacific, but they weren't. And it's all because scientists believed the shifting plates underneath kept the oceans warm and cozy. They did that by creating underwater volcanoes. Besides lava and many gases, they spewed carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, which trapped the heat on Earth. As the sun gradually got hotter, rainfall was able to drag the carbon dioxide back to the ground and into the mantle. And this cycle was able to help the Earth maintain its temperature to host us. Gee, how thoughtful. Earth is so unique because of these plate tectonics. No other planet in the solar system can brag of the same, except for Jupiter's frozen moon Europa. It's shown evidence of moving plate tectonics within the core. And even though Venus and Mars have hot interiors, there hasn't been any sign of such activity.
As the ground continues to cut across the land, everything in sight has now descended underground. If the plates were to move 300 feet a day for a year, the entire planet's landscape would go through a total makeover. A bad one. Life as we know would cease to exist, except for maybe microscopic bacteria and a few insects that can survive such harsh conditions. The polar ice caps wouldn't hold any more ice, and volcanoes would continuously be erupting. The planet would just end up looking like a hot fireball of destruction, and maybe even burn up entirely.
Luckily, this is purely a hypothetical thought experiment. So, sit back, relax, and don't worry about the ground moving under your feet. It's taking its sweet time at a safe pace.
Woohoo!
An earthquake in Indonesia began in 1829 and lasted a mighty 32 years. It reached its climax in 1861 and hit a magnitude of around 8.5. It was caused by the tectonic plates below the island slowly clashing against each other. Researchers discovered that the quake had been building for some time after analyzing the coral in the area. They found it was being periodically exposed to the open air. That was caused by the gradual earthquake moving the land up and down. Scientists call these decades-long silent earthquakes slow slip events. A single lightning bolt can warm the air to around 54,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat makes the air expand quickly, creating a shock wave or boom, which we know to be thunder. There are close to 3 trillion trees on Earth. That translates to roughly around 422 trees for every person. Before humans, the number was nearer to 6 trillion. Almost 70% of the Earth's surface is covered by water, which on average is around 2.5 miles deep. 97% of Earth's volcanoes lie underwater, as well as the mid-ocean ridge, a massive mountain range that is over 40,000 miles long. Humans have mined around 190,000 tons of gold from the planet. Experts predict there is around 20% still left to be mined, but this figure is constantly changing. The world's largest active volcano is in Hawaii. Called Mauna Loa, it's over 2.5 miles above sea level. Given that most of it is underwater, the volcano's summit is a staggering 11 miles from its base. That's the same length as over 160 football fields. The highest ever recorded temperature on Earth was a sweltering 136 degrees Fahrenheit. It was recorded in El Azizia, or modern-day Libya, on September 13, 1922. The lowest temperature was a chilling minus 129 degrees Fahrenheit, recorded at Russia's Vostok station in 1983. Earth is the fifth largest planet in the solar system, behind Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. It has a circumference of roughly 25,000 miles, and it would take the average person around 8,300 hours to walk around the face of the Earth. The separation between Earth's land masses would make such a trek almost impossible, though. It takes 365.25 days for the Earth to orbit the Sun. Because our calendar years only have 365 days, we add an extra leap day every 4 years to make up for the difference. Russia is the largest country on the planet, with a total area of about 6.5 million square miles. It encompasses more than 1/8 of the Earth's inhabited land area, but still has a relatively small population given its size. Earth is the only planet with one moon. Mercury and Venus have no moons, while every other planet has 2 or more. Earth is over 4 billion years old. Scientists calculate this by looking at the planet's oldest rocks, as well as meteorites that have crash-landed. They used meteorites as they were formed at the same time as Earth, when the solar system was forming. The ground we walk on is basically recycled. The planet's rock cycle turns igneous rocks to sedimentary ones, then transforms those into metamorphic rocks, and back again. Like Earth, our moon also experiences earthquakes. They're less common and intense than the ones we have, and are caused by tidal stresses. A tidal stress is basically the relationship between the gravitational pull of the moon on the Earth and that of the Earth on the moon. Despite being the 5th largest continent, Antarctica holds 70% of the planet's fresh water and about 90% of its ice. Bangkok is the most visited city in the world, boasting 23 million visitors in 2019 alone. Paris, London, Dubai, and Singapore make up the other cities in the top 5. The lowest layer of Earth's atmosphere is called the troposphere and is the reason we have weather. Sunlight heats the planet's surface, which causes warm air to rise up to the troposphere. This air then expands and cools as the air pressure decreases and sinks down, where it is then warmed by the Earth again. Coral reefs are the largest living structures on the planet, with some even being visible from space. Coral reefs hold the most species per area of any of Earth's ecosystems, even more than rainforests. Earth got its name around 1,000 years ago, and it comes from the German word meaning the ground, but there's no evidence to show who actually named it. Of all the planets, Earth is also the only one which is not named after a Greek or Roman deity. The deepest point of the ocean is the Mariana Trench. It's a whopping 7 miles below sea level. Coastlines cover about 20% of U.S. land, but are home to more than 50% of the U.S. population. The Earth isn't actually a sphere. It's more like a squished ball that bulges at the equator. The bulge is caused by the force of the Earth spinning, which makes the north and south poles slightly flat. The Earth spins on its axis, which is basically an imaginary straight line. Earth has seasons because the axis is tilted, causing the sun's rays to hit different parts of the planet more directly, depending on the time of year. If the sun was as tall as a standard door, the Earth would be around the size of a nickel. The Earth's rate of rotation is gradually decreasing. It's happening so slowly that it would take as much as 140 million years for the length of a day to increase to 25 hours.
Get equipped for any season with brand new Brightside merch. Click the link and grab your print.
The biggest animal on Earth is the Antarctic blue whale. It can reach lengths of 100 feet and weigh up to 400,000 pounds, which is around the same as 33 elephants. The temperature at the center of the Earth is around the same as the surface of the Sun, at almost 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Earth is around 10,000 times older than humans. Earth is around 4.5 billion years old. whereas humans have been around for, at most, 450,000 years. There are around 34,000 known species of fish. The actual number is way higher though, as a whopping 95% of our oceans still haven't been explored. America's Route 66 is longer than the journey to the Earth's core. The distance to the core is roughly 2,000 miles. Route 66 is almost 2,500 miles. The Earth is made up of three main components: the crust, the mantle, and the core, which is divided into the outer core and the inner core. Scientists have estimated that there are around 8.7 million species on the planet. Out of this, between 1 to 2 million of these species are animals. But roughly 86% of land species and 91% of fish have yet to be discovered by humans. Ancient astronomers used to think that the Earth was the center of the universe. For 2,000 years, they believed the Earth to be static, while other bodies traveled in orbit around us. In 1543, Copernicus published his sun-centered model of the solar system. Earth is the densest planet in the solar system. The density varies across its different crusts, but the planet's average density is just over 3 ounces per cubic inch. Mount Everest is the highest point on the planet. Its peak is the highest altitude above sea level at around 5.5 miles. Each year, 1 septillion crystals of snow fall on Earth. That's a trillion snowflakes. Snow covers about 31% of Earth's land area each year. Of Earth's water, only around 3% is fresh water. The other 97% is salted. Of that 3%, about 2% is frozen in ice and glaciers. So, less than 1% of the planet's fresh water is actually in lakes, rivers, and underground. The world's largest inland body of water, or lake to us normal people, is the Caspian Sea. It has an area of 140,000 miles squared. The world's deepest lake is Lake Baikal in Russia and is 5,300 feet deep. Earth's atmosphere is roughly 78% nitrogen and 21% oxygen, with small amounts of water vapor, carbon dioxide, and other gases. No other planet is believed to have this much oxygen, which explains why Earth is the only planet where life has been discovered so far. Apart from the Moon, there are 2 asteroids in co-orbital orbits with Earth, sometimes called Earth's second moon. 3753 Cruithne is an asteroid that looks like it's following the Earth in orbit, but it's actually following its own path around the Sun. 2002 AA29 is another asteroid which makes a horseshoe orbit around the Earth that draws it close to the planet every 95 years.
You have friends over for dinner. You set your drink on the counter and go help your friend set out some desserts. When you get back, you notice the liquid in your cup. It's sloshing around and the ice cubes look like ships on a rough sea. Now you feel it too. On the ceiling, the chandelier is swinging like mad. Then you hear someone scream, "Earthquake!" The house and everything in it is rocking back and forth. You try to run for cover, but the shaking keeps you stuck in place, fighting to keep your balance. The cabinets look possessed, and glasses and dishes fly out and smash on the floor. The bookshelves topple over, and everything hanging on the walls sways and falls off. You duck under the dining room table, trying not to get hurt on all those broken dishes. Yeah, you've been through earthquakes before, but none like this. Checking your phone? Typical, no signal. You can't believe what's about to happen. The screams get louder, and suddenly the whole house collapses. The biggest earthquake ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960. Disaster came in the afternoon, just when everyone was out enjoying themselves. To cause serious life-changing damage, you need to have a magnitude of around 7 or so on the Richter scale. This one was 9.5. This part of Chile is smack dab on the so-called Ring of Fire, the most active volcanic and seismic area in the world along the Pacific Rim. The initial shaking lasted around 10 minutes, and after 2 days, many aftershocks were still strong enough to set off a volcano in the south of the country. But that's not where it ended. The earthquake unleashed a series of tidal waves all over the Pacific Ocean, with some reaching over 80 feet high. The waves and earthquake were so strong that they even affected Hawaii, Japan, and the Philippines. It caused around $500 million $1960 worth of damage. Many were left homeless. Much of their infrastructure was smashed too. Buildings as far as the eye could see were toppled, and debris piled everywhere. Scientists estimate that this earthquake was so powerful, it shifted the Earth's axis, making our days 1.26 microseconds shorter. That might not seem like a lot, but think about it. Just one natural disaster was strong enough to make time move. Many of the coastal cities were flattened and floods were widespread. The economy spiraled downward. According to studies, if this earthquake happened today, it caused more than $20 billion in damages. So, what would happen if an earthquake twice that size hit without warning? For starters, you'd likely feel the effects even further away. Tidal waves wouldn't just hit the coasts of Japan and the Philippines. They would move even further to China, Korea, Vietnam, and even Australia. And those waves would be significantly higher than 80 feet, perhaps double that. That's like 8 giraffes piled on top of each other, surfing your way. If you lived by the coast, you'd notice the waves. If you saw the water recede way back so you could practically see where all the fish call home, you'd know it was time to run. Chances are that a tsunami's heading your way. Say it really happens. You're caught under the wreckage, not knowing what's going on. You manage to free yourself and escape to the fresh air. And you're not alone, because all the houses in the neighborhood have turned into piles of bricks and rubble. The bridges have also collapsed, leaving people stranded on either side. You look around, dust yourself off, and rush to find help. Fire trucks and ambulances drive between the broken-down cars and rubble. You try to make it to your car, but the aftershocks are still hitting, and you're getting tossed to the sidewalk. With all the cell towers down, you can't call anyone on your phone. Your knees are shaking, but you manage to power through. Once you reach your car, you see it crushed under a boulder, like a giant soda can. You continue on foot and eventually reach downtown. It looks as if some giant got angry and knocked all the buildings down. You push forward and try to see if you can find some help. Without warning, your phone vibrates. You check it and see 1,000 notifications about a 20-magnitude earthquake. You're still shaking, but that's all you. The ground is still for now. Uh-oh. You hear something in the distance, racing towards you. To your right, you see tidal waves as tall as buildings charging at you. Still in shock, not knowing what to do, you now come to your senses and run. You don't even know which way to go. There's a tsunami right behind you, and in front of you are broken down buildings with rocks and concrete still falling everywhere. Wait, there's a building that's somehow still standing. You need to get on top of that thing. You reach the elevator, but it's jammed. Not surprising. You bolt up the stairs as fast as you can, tripping on broken glass and plaster, but always managing to get back up. You look out a window and see the water. It's so close. You're nearly at the top. A few more flights and… whoosh. The water forces its way into the building and drags you down at least 2 floors. You can barely see anything. Still, you know you must swim up. But the water keeps forcing you downwards. After about 30 seconds, you manage to swim your way out and continue climbing to the top. You scramble to the top floor and collapse on the roof. You're safe for now. The tidal wave is still going strong, plowing its way through the ravaged city center. Your phone is now waterlogged and useless. You have a perfect 360-degree view of your town covered in water and debris. The ground starts to shake again. Maybe you'll just sit around until this is all over, waiting for the rescue helicopter. But then, a loud explosion that almost breaks your eardrums shakes the ground even more. Off in the distance, smoke is rising, and soon it covers the entire sky. Darkness hides the morning sun. That's when you can see lava shooting up into the air and landing nearby. The lava forms into a river, flowing its way into town block by block. With this much seismic movement and the high intensity of the earthquake, the world's tectonic plates have shifted so that magma is pushing its way to the surface. From the earth, steam begins to vent. Then the heat hits you. You see the magma cover the ground like a blanket, eating up every car in its way. What's worse is that the magma is melting the foundations of the buildings that managed to withstand the earthquake and the tsunami. The buildings in the distance are now sinking and collapsing into the raging lava pool that's replaced your town. One by one, every building descends. That means, the building where you're standing is also swaying. It's about to fail. That's when you see the light. You look up and see a helicopter above in the distance. You wave your arms, run around, jump, anything to get noticed. And it works. The chopper makes a few circles and finally drops you a rope ladder. As you're lifted in the chopper, you take a good look at the world below you as it wriggles around like noodles in a strainer. You land a few miles out and are immediately treated by a doctor in an emergency triage center. You were one of the lucky ones. A year later, the tsunami water has receded. The lava that flowed inland has cooled, but all that magma permanently changed the ground below it, and the whole town is gone. The disaster has thrown the entire country into a financial nightmare that'll last decades. It takes months to survey the town, making sure there's no dangerous electrical wires or busted gas pipes anywhere. They're rebuilding your town farther inland from where the old one was. In other towns, they rebuild directly over the ruins. In others, they just decide to move everyone to a nearby city. Floods, tornadoes, tsunamis, hurricanes, yikes. All these natural disasters can get extremely dangerous, but we're kind of familiar with them. But how about a natural disaster that has never happened before, but could occur any moment now? It might be a super eruption. That's what happens when a supervolcano erupts. You might know that Yellowstone Park is located on top of a supervolcano. The last massive eruption there happened about 664,000 years ago, and the one before that, approximately 1.3 million years ago. If we do the math, we'll understand that the next eruption might be due anytime soon. There's no strong evidence that the supervolcano is waking up or preparing for an eruption, but what would it be like if it did happen? Months before the eruption, small-scale earthquakes would become more frequent and more powerful in the area. Not long before the eruption, the growing pressure would push up the ground over the volcano, creating a dome. Narrow cracks would open along the edges of this dome. The magma would then start rising toward the surface, and then the eruption would kick off. A massive column of lava and ash would shoot up into the air to a height of over 16 miles. The volcano would keep pumping ash for days on end. The air in that area would heat up to 570 degrees Fahrenheit. For all living creatures, ash fallout would be one of the most dangerous consequences of the eruption. Buildings and trees would start collapsing under the weight of this dense substance. It would only take a couple of days for a 10-foot layer of ash to cover the territory of about 50 miles around the center of the eruption. After the ash got into the stratosphere, the temperatures all over the world would start to drop. The eruption would also be rich in sulfur. The collapse of a massive star can produce it too. Gamma rays could present a serious danger to Earth. If a gamma ray burst happened close to our home planet, it could rip our ozone layer away. After that, we would be left unprotected from the sun's ultraviolet radiation. Plus, gamma rays could also produce ground ozone. This kind of ozone could seep into the ocean since it's water-soluble, and that would lead to a mass extinction of marine life. Plants wouldn't survive this disaster either. Now, come to think of it, giant sinkholes could swallow entire communities. One of such sinkholes opened up in the city of New York. It pulled a parked van into the earth. That happened in the summer of 2022. And it wasn't the only sinkhole to appear in that area. Local inhabitants reported about 4,000 sinkholes all over the city. This kind of problem is also very common in Florida, and it's much more serious than it may sound. Sinkholes open all of a sudden, pulling down everything and everyone that happens to be nearby. Sinkholes appear all over the world, which makes them a global problem. They're totally unpredictable and form without warning. Luckily, experts know what causes them. In some areas, there are vast areas of groundwater. But during droughts, this water dries up. This creates large empty caverns, and after heavy rains, the surface over such a cavern can collapse, creating a sinkhole within minutes. Now, what if we came across a wandering black hole? You might know that a black hole is a region in space where gravity is so powerful that not even light can escape its clutches. Luckily, the nearest one to us is 1,500 light-years away. Nothing to worry about, right? Until you find out about wandering black holes. Now, things get definitely way creepier. If such a black hole entered the solar system, Earth would be doomed. We wouldn't stand a chance against this space monster. In 2012, 13 wandering black holes were spotted not so far away from our planet. But worry not. Not far away, in space terms, means around 1 billion light-years away. So we've got some time left. Plus, the possibility of such a disaster is very, very low. Another natural disaster we haven't experienced yet is a mega flood. It's never happened before, but the changes in climate do make for a risky potential. It could start, let's say, in California. This state experienced some really bad flooding in the past. One of such floods stretched up to 60 miles across and 300 miles long. If a similar disaster happened these days, it would cause $1 trillion worth of damage. It would also uproot millions of people. Now let's talk about a hypercane. Judging from the name, this natural disaster might get extreme. A hypercane is a theoretical hurricane of unsurpassed power. It would occur if the ocean became overheated as a result of climate change, or because of a massive volcanic eruption. In any case, these conditions could create a hurricane that would stretch way beyond the lower stratosphere. And as you may guess, regular hurricanes don't do that. The hypercane speed would reach 500 miles per hour. The pressure inside would be low enough not to let the hypercane to wear out as quickly as other hurricanes. The hypercane could last for weeks on end. But the worst thing? It could damage or even destroy part of Earth's ozone layer, and the hole could be the size of the entire North American continent. Now, this disaster did happen before. About 66 million years ago. I bet you know what I'm hinting at. Yep, that very meteor that supposedly wiped out dinosaurs off the face of the Earth. This 7-mile-wide space visitor was traveling at 67,000 miles per hour. As a result of the collision, 75% of all life on the planet disappeared, and winter reigned on Earth for 18 months. Want to know a secret? Meteors strike Earth all the time. Even more of them barely miss our planet. But it's also very hard to predict meteor strikes. Scientists miss a lot of them until they just nearly miss us. That's why experts are working on an early warning system that could prevent disasters. It could make meteor impacts less catastrophic, or at least allow people time to evacuate. It could also be our very own sun that would be responsible for another natural disaster. I'm talking about a massive solar flare. On the scale of damage to society, few catastrophes can compare to this event. It wouldn't destroy buildings like a tsunami or an earthquake. Neither would it end lives in the same way a supervolcano or meteor would. But it would cripple our entire way of life by destroying the whole electronic infrastructure of Earth. The cost of this disaster would reach trillions of dollars. It'd cause other infrastructures to fail. Communication, medicine, transportation, banking systems, those would tumble like dominoes, and it would be incredibly hard to recover them. Earth would be left without electricity for years. There would be no electric light, no computers, no phones. Water supply systems would be out of order. There would be no food in supermarkets. There would be no electricity, and people wouldn't be able to reboot the already broken power grids. In 1859, people all over the world woke up in the middle of the night. It was as light as during the day. The skies were illuminated with auroras, red, green, purple. They appeared even in the regions where no one had seen them before, like the Bahamas, Jamaica, Or Hawaii. Telegraphs got electrically charged, even though they were disconnected. In many areas, fires started. That was when technology barely existed. But imagine the avalanche of problems a solar flare could cause today. There is a powerful force hiding underground where tectonic plates meet, and one forces another under it. This happens in the Pacific and Indian Oceans. Strain builds over centuries. The tension is unbearable until the megathrust awakens. The Earth shakes with a magnitude that can exceed 9 points, more powerful than any other earthquake. When the seafloor suddenly gets pushed up fast, it sends a huge ripple across the water, and a tsunami of huge force is out. These waves are called teletsunamis, and they cross entire ocean basins, ready to take over coastlines thousands of miles away. The thrust fault stretches over 600 miles. The Earth is not just shaking, it feels like it's tearing apart. This is the power of a megathrust earthquake. Those caught in its path will have to fight for their lives. Japanese authorities recently had to issue their first ever megaquake advisory. It happened because of a strong tremor on the edge of the Nankai Trough ocean floor zone. In the end, most of the warnings were lifted, and there wasn't much damage from the 7.1 magnitude earthquake. Parts of southwestern Japan started to shake, and the superfast trains in Japan slowed down to stay safe, which made travel slower for everyone. But everyone is staying alert as they know about the risk of a megathrust earthquake that could happen within the next few decades in the Nankai Trough. The tectonic plate under the Philippine Sea is slowly sliding underneath the land where Japan is, moving just a few inches every year. The last big earthquakes from this area happened in 1944 and 1946, both with a magnitude of 8.1. These quakes have caused a lot of destruction in the country. The next megathrust earthquake in the region, if it does happen, could be between a magnitude 8 and 9. Scientists still can't agree on how likely this mega earthquake is to happen, but it could be up to 80% certainty. On the other side of the Pacific, scientists from the U.S. Geological Survey have studied a dangerous area along the U.S. West Coast. It's called the Cascadia Subduction Zone, and it stretches from northern California to northern Vancouver Island in Canada. Over the past 14,200 years, there have likely been at least 30 big earthquakes in this region. One major quake happens every 500 years on average. But for a long time now, Cascadia has been quiet, and it worries scientists. They think this might be because the area is locked, meaning the tectonic plates are stuck together and building up a lot of pressure. Eventually, the part of the seafloor could suddenly break and move by several feet. The shaking would be just 5 minutes, but it would create a powerful tsunami as the seafloor shifts that would last for 10 hours. If it happens, it's going to be the worst natural disaster in the country's history, according to experts. The ground on some inland hills could turn into something like quicksand. This would cause the hillsides to slide and crumble, taking down roads and bridges. Around 620,000 buildings could be badly damaged or even collapse, including about 100 hospitals and 2,000 schools. People in Washington state might have to take care of themselves without help for 2 weeks, finding food, water, and shelter on their own. Scientists are studying slow slip events, where the tectonic plates move very slowly over weeks or months, releasing some energy but not enough to stop a big one. Every time the magnitude of an earthquake goes up by just one number, the energy it releases is 40 times bigger. So we'd need about 1 million small earthquakes every day for 500 years straight to release the same energy as one huge magnitude 9 earthquake. But these small earthquakes might be clues that a bigger earthquake is coming. To better monitor the Cascadia Fault, experts are mapping the fault more accurately and adding better monitoring tools offshore. Scientists receive over $10 million to install seismic sensors and seafloor pressure gauges on a fiber optic cable off the coast of Oregon. The goal is to be ready to warn people and potentially save lives when a big earthquake strikes. A sharp megathrust earthquake happened in this part of the world in 1964. It went down in history as the Great Alaska Earthquake and had a magnitude of 9.2. It lasted for more than 4 minutes, making it the most powerful earthquake in the history of the US and North America. The ground shook so hard that it caused huge cracks and landslides. In Anchorage, many houses, buildings, and roads were destroyed because they weren't built to handle such a big earthquake. In some places, the land was permanently changed. For example, the coastline near Kodiak and Hinchinbrook Island was lifted by 30 feet. In other areas, like Gerwood and Portage, the ground sank by 8 feet. They had to rebuild roads higher so they wouldn't be flooded by the tide. A huge 27-foot tsunami wiped out the entire village of Chiniga. Many coastal towns were heavily damaged, not just by the earthquake, but also by tsunamis and the fires that followed. After the main earthquake, there were thousands of smaller aftershocks for months. A moderate earthquake of magnitude 4.4 shook Los Angeles in August 2024. Once it was over, the LA Fire Department checked around the city and didn't find any major damage or anyone hurt. In the nearby city of Pasadena, which is close to the earthquake's epicenter, a water pipe burst inside City Hall and everyone had to leave the building. Thankfully, there was no danger of a tsunami. The best we can do to avoid panic in such situations is to be prepared. Japan is one of the places on Earth where earthquakes happen the most because it sits on the edges of 4 tectonic plates. Around 1,500 of these earthquakes each year are noticeable. Because of this, the people in Japan have learned to live with earthquakes. The 1950 law set a rule that buildings should be able to handle earthquakes up to a magnitude 7 without falling apart. An update 30 years later said that buildings should only have minor damage in such earthquakes and still work as usual. But if an earthquake is even stronger, the law says the building's main job is to not collapse and save people's lives. At the most basic level, buildings are made stronger with thicker beams, pillars, and walls so they can handle shaking better. Another technique is placing special pads made from materials like rubber at the base of a building. Some buildings are even built on thick layers of padding that separate them from the ground completely, which helps protect them during an earthquake. A skyscraper might sway back and forth a lot, moving up to 5 feet. To stop it from getting damaged, engineers can add something called dampers every second floor all the way to the top. These dampers are like giant bicycle pumps, but instead of air, they're filled with liquid. When the building shakes, the dampers push against the liquid inside them. Even though the liquid doesn't squish very much, it can still absorb some of the shaking. When they're building tall skyscrapers, engineers try to make the structure as simple and balanced as possible. This means having each floor the same height and placing the support columns evenly. But sometimes, architects who design skyscrapers don't want to make these compromises because they have creative ideas for how the building should look. Then they have to find compromise solutions. For example, Tokyo's Skytree Tower, one of the tallest buildings in the world, is designed in a futuristic style but also includes special features to protect it from earthquakes. It has a central pillar, like in traditional Japanese pagodas, and seismic dampers that help absorb the energy from an earthquake, keeping the building safe.
The Earth has 3 main layers: 2 parts of the core, the dense, hot inner core, and the molten outer core. Then comes the mantle. And then follows the thin crust, the surface that supports life as we know it. At least, that's what we thought, because now scientists found a new mysterious layer located deep within the solid inner core. Earth's inner core is approximately 2/3 the size of the Moon. And made of nickel and solid iron, it's burning hot. The temperature at the center of our planet is the same as at the surface of the Sun. The outer core can reach almost 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. It's difficult to explore it because we can't go there, and it's like looking through a really dirty window of 3,200 miles of molten metal and rocks. But we can rely on laboratory experiments on heated pressurized rocks, signals from seismic waves, and computer models. When an earthquake hits, it sends out seismic shock waves. Those waves travel through layers at a different speed, depending on the direction they go and the material they move through. In the new study, a team of scientists set a data set of 100,000 deep earthquakes. Some of them went over 60 miles below the surface. When an earthquake happens on one side of our planet, scientists track its waves all along to the other side. Waves change when they come to the other side, so scientists try to understand the materials these waves have passed through. They found a new layer in the core of our planet thanks to earthquakes. Normally, shock waves travel along the equator, but down below, they digress and go into different directions, about 60 degrees to the side. When waves pass through the inner core going from north to south, they will travel more quickly than waves going through the core parallel to the equator. It's important to understand the core because it creates our magnetic field, which in turn protects the planet from things like solar winds that are charged particles coming from the sun. In the 1960s, we discovered the Earth pulsates every 26 seconds. It's like clockwork, a giant heartbeat. The ground is slightly shaking, but we mostly don't feel it. Researchers can still track it. Some of them think the continental shelf comes as a huge wave break under the oceans. For example, the highest part of the North American continent falls off into a deep abyssal plain. One theory says waves hit this spot, producing regular pulses. It's like having all kinds of drums. You hit them with your hands and accidentally slam that one spot that produces the right harmonic bang to rattle our entire planet. If this theory is true, we're lucky there are no more spots like this that can shake the Earth. Other scientists believe the pulsation happens because there's a volcano near the critical spot, the island of Sao Tome in the Bight of Boni. You're walking, running, and jumping, but when you stop, it always feels like you're standing still. In reality, you're moving even when you're perfectly still because our planet is always on the move. Depending on where you're at, you could be spinning through the universe at more than 1,000 miles per hour. If you're on the equator, you'll move the fastest. Let's say you have a basketball spinning on your finger. Check the ball's equator. A random point on it has farther to go in just one spin than any point near your finger. That means the point on the equator is moving more quickly. The Earth is a planet that recycles all the time. The ground we're walking on is recycled. Our planet's rock cycle turns rocks of one type into another. That's a cycle that goes on and on. The depths of our planet are filled with magma. As magma is going out onto the surface, it hardens into rock. Tectonic processes like volcanic activity, earthquakes, mountain building, and all of the other processes that shape the surface of our planet bring that rock to the Earth's surface. When the rock is on the surface, erosion shapes it and shaves its bits off. Those small particles then get deposited. All the pressure coming from above compacts the particles into sedimentary rocks, like, for example, sandstone. Sedimentary rocks can also end up deeper and deeper under the Earth's surface. Since there's a lot of heat and pressure, they get cooked into metamorphic rocks. They can go back to the surface once again, or even end up being re-eroded. Sometimes the crust plates are pushing one under another, and this way, rocks can transform into magma once again. We've explored only 5% of the ocean so far. The ocean itself, as well as life below the seafloor, is still a mystery. The sediments that are underlying our oceans are home to different microorganisms that exist even at depths of 1.5 miles beneath the seafloor. There are microbes hidden deep inside volcanic rocks below the seafloor off of the parts of the Pacific, hidden under 870 feet of sediment. The biosphere under the seafloor is growing extremely slowly compared to life on the surface. Cell division happens every 10 to 1,000 years. Something's different about the Earth's axis. Climate changes and melting glaciers, mostly in the regions like the Himalayas and Alaska, made the axis shift. Our planet has two kinds of poles. Are the south and north magnetic poles. They affect They affect things such as drift and navigation. The axis that the Earth is spinning around is another kind of pole. It shifted a little bit over time, but we don't know exactly why. Researchers realize there are moving masses of water, pushing the Earth's axis eastward. Take a basin of water as an example. If you're moving it back and forth, sloshing makes the water move its weight all around. A similar thing is happening on a planetary level. No matter how large an earthquake is, no human could ever feel an earthquake on the opposite side of the Earth, although some people claim they did. In 2013, there was one near the Kuril Islands with a magnitude of 8.5. It went around 400 miles deep. It was so strong, people in Australia reported they could feel the ground shaking. The strongest earthquake happened in Chile in 1960 with a magnitude of 9.5. The rupture zone stretched from 311 miles to almost 620 miles along the country's coast. Earthquakes with a magnitude of 10 or higher can't happen. The magnitude depends on the length of the fault where it occurs. The longer the fault, the bigger the earthquake. A fault is a break in a part of the planet's crust. It has rocks on both sides, and they move past each other. We haven't found a fault long enough to generate earthquakes with a magnitude of 10 or more. If it happened, it would extend around most of our planet. An earthquake with a magnitude of 12 would require a fault larger than our planet. One side of our planet is getting colder than the other. The Earth has a system that keeps it warm from the inside, a red-hot liquid interior deep below the surface. It spins and, at the same time, generates a magnetic field and gravity. That way, the Earth's core holds the atmosphere closer to the planet's surface. The Earth also absorbs heat from the sun, mostly on the surface. The heat doesn't spread equally on all parts of the Earth. One side of the planet, the Pacific Hemisphere, is losing heat more quickly than another, the African Hemisphere. This happens because land traps more heat than the surface under the ocean. The seafloor is way thinner than the landmass. Also, the temperature caused by the heat coming from inside the Earth is getting lower because of huge amounts of cold water above it. Clouds are not just like some fluffy distant pieces of cotton. They weigh more than 1 million pounds and help regulate our planet's temperature. If you take all the water droplets in clouds and bring them to the surface, you could cover the planet with a liquid layer as thin as a human hair. It doesn't seem like a lot, but this water is crucially important for climate. We'd have warmer temperatures if it weren't for the clouds.
A bridge, a very helpful structure that traces back to the Neolithic times. The oldest bridge in the world, at least the one that is still standing, is the Archidiko Bridge, built more than 3,000 years ago. But there's a river you cannot cross using a bridge, the Amazon River, the largest and longest river in the world. Okay, the Nile River is actually the longest river in the world, but the Amazon wants both titles for itself. The Amazon River is born in Peru and crosses Colombia and Brazil until it reaches a massive delta at the Atlantic Ocean. Its waters travel a longer distance than Frodo and Sam, and yet not a single bridge has ever been built over it. Why is that? First of all, seasonal floods change the size of the river. During dry seasons, the Amazon is about 3 miles wide, but during heavy rains, it can get up to 30 miles wide in a few weeks. Not only that, but the flood also makes the river change its position. Now imagine trying to build a bridge in a place where the ground turns into water for about 4 months. Not an impossible task, but not the easiest one either. Now, if you look back at your geography classes, you might remember that the soil of the riverbank can be very soft, especially in the Amazon, which means it can erode and shift. Heavy rains also create marshes, a type of wetlands that actually reduces the magnitude of the floods and purifies the water. It's also home to many animals. This means that to build a bridge, part of this wetland would have to be drained, which would ruin the lives of all those animals. Besides, the foundations of said bridge would have to be deep, and that would cost a lot of money. The rain creates yet another problem for the potential bridge. It increases the river's water level by 13 to almost 50 feet. Of course, bridges have been built in deep rivers before, like the Padma Bridge, a gigantic structure with a foundation of 417 feet. But because the soil of the Amazon River can erode easily, a bridge would have to be built using floating structures, known as pontoons, and they're not helpful in a river that changes depth whenever it feels like it. Next on our list of things that are a problem to human endeavors is the Amazon rainforest. This forest spreads over 9 countries and is so big and so dense it could cover about half of Europe. This means that a bridge would almost likely connect one patch of the forest to another. A pointless improvement to the lives of capybaras and jaguars. Of course, the real users of such a bridge would be humans. Most people live around the tributaries of the Amazon River, not around the river itself, because who wants to live like a beaver at a dam? There's even a state called Amapá on the left side of the Amazon River that is completely cut off from the rest of Brazil. You could easily take your car and visit its neighbor, a place called French Guiana. But if you wanted to go to another part of Brazil, you'd have to find other means of transportation. Aside from small riverside populations that live right on the riverside, of the Amazon, bigger cities were built near tributary rivers, like the Rio Negro, which has a bridge, by the way, and the Nanay River in Peru. The bridges that go over the Nanay and the Rio Negro are the only 2 bridges over the rivers in the Amazon basin. The lack of good roads and highways inside the Amazon also makes the creation of bridges a pointless endeavor. Back in the 70s, humans had big ideas on how to explore the Amazon ever more, which is why they decided to build a highway which would cut the Amazon basin from left to right. The road, called the Trans-Amazonian Highway, was supposed to bring people to the heart of the Amazon. But it seems like the difficulties of building more than 2,000 miles of road inside a dense rainforest were not foreseen. Halfway through, the project was abandoned because it was super expensive and problematic. Nowadays, highways in the Amazon basin are always flooded, filled with holes and mud. This whole situation creates a ripple effect. People don't live near the river because it's hard to access it. The roads don't go there either, because it's hard to build them. Which in turn makes even fewer people want to settle on the banks of the Amazon River, because they have no roads to get them there. So, if there are no roads and no bridges, how do people live there? You're not gonna believe this, but the riverside population uses a very old but reliable invention called a boat. The Amazon River is fully navigable, and the people that live there use it like a road. Much like motorcycles, cars, and buses, the Amazon River has canoes, speedboats, and ferries. There's even a very specific ferry called Obidense, transporting people to the municipality of Óbidos, hence the name. Locals do everything on boats. They even have a boat hospital that floats around and visits riverside populations, and a boat bank, so you can do all your bank-related things while looking at the vastness of the Amazon. Honestly, genius invention. The downside to this lack of bridges is that it stops us from exploring the truly hidden gems of the world. In the Amazon, for example, there are over 10,000 undiscovered archaeological sites. We may never be able to dig out stuff like fortified villages, geoglyphs, and many other structures. It would be pretty neat to go full-on Lara Croft in the middle of the Amazon, but these findings are tucked deep in the heart of the forest. At the same time, only on a boat are you able to witness the crazy phenomenon of the unmixed waters of the Rio Negro and the Solimões on the Amazon River. For more than 3 miles, these 2 tributaries of the Amazon River flow side by side without mixing. The speed and the temperature of these waters are different, so you'll see a river that looks like coffee and Coca-Cola mixed. This awesome phenomenon is called the meeting of waters. But the Amazon River is not the only river in the world deemed bridgeless. The Congo River, the second longest river in Africa, only has 1 bridge crossing it. The 2 Congos, yes, there are 2 different countries in the world named Congo, are separated by the Congo River, and so far, no roads connect them. Also, fun fact, Some geologists believe that back when Gondwana existed and the continents were all cuddled together, the Amazon and the Congo River were one river connected to each other. Another place with a lack of bridges is the east side of the Thames in London. The west side of the river is narrower, which makes building a bridge easier. There are about 33 bridges on the west side alone, but if you want to cross the river from the east side, it's gonna be a hassle. The thing is, back in the 1800s, shipping companies decided that building too many bridges over the Thames was too expensive, because this was a shipping route and the bridges would have to be taller than usual. The structure would also have to be long, since some parts of the Thames are about 1,870 feet wide. But building long bridges is not a problem per se. In Rio de Janeiro, for example, you can find the Rio Niterói Bridge, which is about 8.26 miles long. Back when it was built in the 70s, it was the second longest bridge in the world. The bridge is so long that in 2018, a girl was born while her mother was crossing it, and now the birthplace in her birth certificate is literally the bridge. There's also no U-turn on it, so if you drive onto the bridge by mistake, you're in for a long drive. So next time you feel like exploring the Amazon, remember to pack your own boat. This area might just be the most important spot in America right now, as it is worth over $1 trillion. There's something incredibly valuable hidden right here at Thacker Pass, and it is going to shake things up, not just in Nevada, but in the US economy and its global relations. The McDermott Caldera is a massive area, about 28 miles long by 22 miles wide, stretching across northern Nevada and southern Oregon. It's in Humboldt County, a quiet, rural place with just one main city that's going to change a lot in the next 5 to 10 years. That's because they found white gold there. We're talking about lithium. And to explain why this metal is so important, we need a scale. On one side, we place a chunk of lithium, and on the other, an apple. What do you think will happen? If both have the same volume, the scale is going to tip toward the apple. That's because lithium is super light. Its density is about 0.3 ounces per cubic inch, which makes it the lightest solid you can find at room temperature. Lithium is also extremely reactive. That means it combines with other elements very easily, and it can catch fire just as easily. Mix it with water, fire. Expose it to air, yep, fire again. But when you combine its lightness with its high reactivity, you get a material that's perfect for batteries, like the one powering your smartphone, laptop, or even your electric car. Nevada's been hiding this treasure for about 16 million years. The McDermott Caldera used to be a volcanic hotspot, spewing molten rock and creating a huge lake filled with mineral-rich waters. Over time, that lake dried up, leaving behind thick layers of clay loaded with lithium. Right now, Thacker Pass Mine is sitting on one of the biggest untapped lithium reserves in the world, worth about $1.5 trillion. If everything goes as planned, they expect it to produce about 40,000 tons of high-quality lithium a year. And that's enough to make batteries for up to 800,000 electric cars. Like I mentioned earlier, this metal is the backbone of modern batteries. And with the world racing toward green energy, the demand for lithium is skyrocketing. Since 2020, its price has gone up more than 10 times, making it the most expensive battery metal in the world. That means it's way more expensive than magnesium, nickel, cobalt, and other materials used in rechargeable batteries. Right now, we're using about 1.16 million tons of lithium per year, and roughly 85% of it goes into making batteries, mostly for cars. Between 2030 and 2040, experts think we will need to double the money we're putting into production, from $94 billion to $188 billion. At the same time, investment in batteries will jump by over 200%, reaching $686 billion. Finally, by 2050, the demand for lithium is expected to be more than 10 times higher than what we're producing now. Sorry, I know that's a lot of numbers, but I just want to show how important Thacker Pass will be for the whole world. This mine is going to be key to keeping everything running. I mean, literally, since most of the future demand will be for things like cars, electric bikes, scooters, and renewable energy storage. Nevada could also be the epicenter of a global energy revolution, with the US aiming to cut pollution by 50% by 2030. A big part of that is replacing gas-powered vehicles with electric ones. And to make that happen, America is going to need a whole lot more lithium than it's producing right now. Nowadays, most of the metal used in the United States come from countries like Chile and Argentina. So if America wants to be a leader in this market, it really needs to invest more and more in projects like Thacker Pass. But there's another challenge. Finding lithium in a mine is one thing, but refining it is another story. Just like diamonds are carefully cut and shaped to bring out their sparkle and sold in rings and necklaces, something similar needs to be done with lithium. The raw material that comes from the mines has to be refined into a pure form that can actually be used in things like batteries. And China pretty much dominates this part of the market, and they're responsible for about 75% of global lithium-ion battery production. In other words, it doesn't matter if a country finds this powerful metal on its land, it will probably still need China to help refine it. So, the US is eager to strengthen its supply chain. In fact, they're so excited about this possibility that authorities have invested over $2 billion in loans into the Nevada project. Because of that, Thacker Pass could make the US a leader in lithium production worldwide. If their estimates are right, the McDermott caldera could hold nearly half of the world's known lithium reserves. It would almost double the reserves found in Bolivia's salt flats, for example, which used to hold the record for the world's largest deposit. This discovery is about to change Humboldt County for good. Those quiet streets surrounded by nature will never feel the same again. The mine will need about 2,000 workers who will probably move there from other cities. Those workers will need houses, hospitals, schools for their kids, and all the necessary services. Do you see how it's like a ripple effect? For every person hired to work on the project during construction, 6 more people will get hired in the state to support them. Thacker Pass is also going to have a huge impact on the economy, not just in Nevada, but all across the country. People expect the mine to be active for 35 years, and each year it's expected to generate over $2 billion. But here's the thing. In Thacker Pass, they'll be extracting lithium from clay, and this process has never been done on such a huge scale before. So it's kind of a hit or miss. But if it works, it could completely change the industry. Big question. Who's interested in all this? Well, we've got 3 big companies eyeing the lithium market in the US. First, there's ExxonMobil. The oil giant wants to start producing lithium by 2027, and they have plans to become the top supplier for electric vehicles by 2030. Then there's General Motors, the company behind big car brands like Chevrolet and Cadillac. They're so interested in this business that they agreed to pay $625 million for a 38% stake in Thacker Pass. And finally, Tesla. In 2023, they started building a factory in Texas to process lithium. It's all part of their plan to handle more of their supply chain themselves. Now that you know how important lithium is, you might be wondering, what if we run out? Well, that could happen, since it comes from mining and, just like gold, is a finite resource. But that doesn't mean we'd have to give up smartphones or electric cars. If we ever run out of this metal, we'd probably find new ways to produce batteries. In fact, some experts think thermal batteries could be the next big thing. They store extra energy from renewable resources like wind or solar power, which are very cheap. So they represent a new way of storing energy at a small fraction of the cost. Nowadays, they're primarily used for powering the production of steel, cement, and chemicals. Thermal batteries are also being used to heat and cool large buildings. However, more and more projects are focusing on bringing this technology into private spaces, like houses and apartments. Experts are optimistic that initiatives like these could make thermal batteries as well known as electric batteries, and they might soon become a regular part of our daily lives. You could wake up in New York, grab a bagel for breakfast, hop on a train, and by lunchtime, you'd already be in London enjoying fish and chips. What sounds like every tourist's dream could be a reality soon. Right now, traveling between these two cities usually takes about 8 endless hours by plane. But a high-speed train zipping through a massive transatlantic tunnel could make the same journey in just 54 minutes. The plan is to construct this train beneath the Atlantic Ocean, so the stations would look like those trendy underwater restaurants. Not only would you get to Europe in record time, but you wouldn't have to deal with jet lag or feel sick from turbulence. So far, this mega project sounds amazing, but can we really pull this off? Well, that's the million-dollar question. Actually, it's more like a $20 trillion question. That's how much this train and its futuristic underwater stations would cost. It's hard to imagine anyone having enough money to construct it, so specialists thought it was out of the question. But people started feeling hopeful again when Elon Musk dropped this announcement. He said not only is this kind of transportation possible, but his company could make it happen for 1,000 times less than everyone thought. Traveling between New York and London in less than an hour means the train would have to hit a jaw-dropping speed of 3,000 miles per hour. Yep, 3,000. That's about 5 times faster than the cruising speed of a commercial airplane like a Boeing 747. So, how is this even possible? Well, it's not an average tunnel. We're talking about a vacuum-sealed tube underwater, which cuts out air resistance, letting trains zip through at insane speeds. And it's not just any train. It's more like a high-tech aerodynamic capsule that levitates and moves thanks to magnetic propulsion. At least that's what experts think, since this kind of technology is already in use today with the fastest public train in the world, the Shanghai Maglev. This machine runs in China and hits a top speed of 186 miles per hour. What's crazy is that its locomotives are not even touching the tracks. They're literally levitating and floating just about 0.4 inches above the ground. This line takes people from Shanghai to Pudong International Airport, so travelers don't have to worry about traffic and can get to their flights super fast. This cutting-edge technology makes a 19-mile trip take just 8 minutes and 10 seconds. With a regular train, that same journey would be about 4 times longer. Back in 2001, people worked hard over 2 years to construct the maglev train, and they also spent a lot of money, as the whole project cost over $1 billion. Despite that crazy initial price tag, keeping this line running is not as expensive as it might seem. It's actually cheaper to operate than regular trains. Since the maglev doesn't touch the tracks, that means a lot less wear and tear and way lower maintenance costs. On top of that, its propulsion system is impressively energy efficient. As we've already mentioned, this is the fastest operational train in the world, but China isn't stopping there. They're likely to break their own record soon, having already unveiled a prototype of their next generation train, the CR450. This sleek silver bullet had reached test speeds as high as 281 miles. If this project comes to life, if people really start using it on a daily basis, it will be a game changer for high-speed rail. And it could shrink the journey between Beijing and Shanghai to less than 3 hours. That's like 1 hour less than what people take when traveling on today's high-speed train. Now, the team just needs to run a couple more tests to ensure it meets all necessary standards for commercial operations. This car looks like a Batmobile, and it's probably just as powerful. Say hello to the amazing Koenigsegg Jesko Absolute. Its sleek, futuristic design isn't just for show. Every detail on this machine was crafted to cut through air with precision, reducing drag and turbulence while boosting its high-speed performance. Experts ran the first computer simulations, and the Jesko Absolute hit an astonishing 311 miles per hour. but the team is positive that it can go even faster. This beast comes close to the cruising speed of small jets, and because of that, it smashed all records and became the fastest car in the world. When you visit the Coventry Transport Museum in England, you'll come face to face with a terrestrial vehicle that looks more like a rocket than a car. Meet the Bloodhound LSR. It's been on display since 2019, right after hitting 628 miles per hour during tests in South Africa's Kalahari Desert. But the team behind this vehicle isn't satisfied just yet, and they're 99% sure they can go even faster. So, they're planning to bring it back to the track soon, aiming to smash another record. But there's a catch. The team is still looking for a fearless, skilled pilot who can handle speeds over 800 miles per hour. And before you rush to sign up for the challenge, let me remind you, it's going to take more than just guts. You will need a major sponsorship deal too, because getting back this vehicle on the track and breaking that land speed record could cost around $15 million. If you're curious about the fastest jets in the world, look no further. Meet the North American X-15, a legendary aircraft that flew for nearly 10 years and set an unofficial world speed record of 4,520 miles per hour. This beast is so impressive that it actually reached the edge of space during its test flights in the 1960s. Yep, astronauts territory. To put that into perspective, commercial airplanes, like the ones we fly in, usually travel at altitudes of up to 42,000 feet, but the X-15 soared more than 354,000 feet. Now, imagine flying faster than ever before, zooming through the sky at over 5 times the speed of sound. That's exactly what NASA did with this revolutionary aircraft, known as the X-43A. This airplane is scramjet powered, which basically means it's an engine that operates at a supersonic level. I mean, it doesn't have any moving parts like regular jet engines do, like turbines. Instead, it uses the plane's speed to push air into the engine. The air gets compressed or squished by the plane's fast motion, then mixed with fuel and burned to produce thrust. For non-experts, this might seem crazy, even dangerous. In fact, we should mention that the first flights of the X-43A weren't exactly smooth sailing. The initial attempt happened back in June of 2001, but the airplane was destroyed after the booster rocket went out of control. Thankfully, the second and third attempts were a huge success, with record-breaking flights that made history. I know elevators aren't the first thing that comes to mind when we think about super-fast means of transportation, but it's only thanks to ultra-modern high-speed elevators that skyscrapers as tall as the Burj Khalifa and Taipei 101 became accessible. One of the fastest elevators in the world is located in the Shanghai Tower in China, which has 128 floors. To get people from the ground floor to the top of the building quickly, the elevator has to move at an incredible speed of 67 feet per second. That's faster than Usain Bolt at his top speed, but just a little slower than a cheetah. Still, it is super fast, about 5 times quicker than the elevators we ride in most buildings. So if you're afraid of heights, speed, and tight spaces, we suggest you avoid going that far. There's a stretch of water that even the most experienced explorers fear. No matter what season you choose to cross it in, you risk meeting face to face with waves that can reach as tall as the Hollywood sign. I'm talking about the Drake Passage, the waterway connecting the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean, stretching from Cape Horn at South America's southernmost tip to Antarctica's South Shetland Islands. It's about as wide as the distance from London to Berlin and takes up to 48 hours to cross. Some sailors compare getting on the other side to going to the moon. That's how challenging it is. Even the man who discovered it, Sir Francis Drake, never sailed these waters because they seemed too dangerous to him and opted for a calmer, although longer, Strait of Magellan. The passage took the lives of around 20,000 sailors and over 800 ships. Tourists who want to see Antarctica cross the Drake Passage on a regular basis, although it's still often called the world's most terrifying ocean crossing. The Antarctic Peninsula, where travelers go, isn't really part of Antarctica itself. It sticks out and points towards South America like two fingers almost touching it. The water gets squeezed between these two land masses, making strong ocean currents. The passage is part of the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the largest ocean current on Earth. The water rushes through the passage at a speed between 95 and 150 million cubic meters per second, which makes it rougher. And then there are winds that usually blow from west to east and are very strong between 40 and 60 degrees latitude. That's why those areas are called the Roaring Forties, Furious 50s, and Screaming 60s. Land slows down winds, which is why storms hitting Ireland and the UK get weaker as they move east. But Drake's latitude is the only place where winds can blow all around the Earth without being stopped by land. So they keep getting faster. These strong winds turn into huge waves that can hit ships really hard, normally around 13 to 16 feet tall. They're much higher than waves in the Atlantic. Drake Passage also has underwater mountains that you can't see. The huge current squeezes through this narrow passage and causes waves to crash against these mountains underwater. These internal waves create whirls that bring cold water up from the deep ocean. So it's not just rough on the surface, the water is wild all the way down. The first sailor managed to sail around Cape Horn and through the Drake Passage in 1616. It was a Dutch navigator, Willem Schouten, in 1616. But the most famous attempt to cross it was undertaken by Sir Ernest Henry Shackleton on his ship named Endurance. He and 27 of his men set off from South Georgia, aiming to reach Vassal Bay in Antarctica. But things didn't go as planned. On January 19, 1915, their ship got stuck in the ice. And by October, it began to sink. They camped on floating ice for 2 months before sailing lifeboats to a remote, icy place called Elephant Island. Shackleton and 5 men made a risky journey to South Georgia to get help. It took them 15 days to cross Drake Passage with hurricane winds. Finally, they arrived safely and organized a rescue for the rest of their crew. Scientists found the shipwreck of Endurance only in 2022, 10,000 feet below the water. In December of 2019, 6 fearless athletes decided to cross the Drake Passage by rowing a boat for the first time in history. It took them 12 days of non-stop rowing with a 90-minute rotation of rowers. They managed to do it, and it was probably the hardest possible way to cross the passage. The athletes mentioned it was cold, wet, and dirty, and the waves hit them like walls. The weather in the Drake Passage changes a lot, but ship captains can always see it coming and change their path. They will move the departure time to have a safety margin and not to get stuck in the middle of the passage in the worst possible conditions. Sometimes, the journey will be smooth and calm, and they call it Drake Lake. Other times, people on the ship will feel rough waves, which is called Drake Shake. Some experienced captains who often cross the passage say that the Drake Lake effect happens once in every 10 crossings. And they see the Drake Shake once or twice in every 10 journeys. A schooner or a kayak will probably not survive the journey among giant waves, but modest vessels and cruise ships have sturdy hulls and advanced stabilizing mechanisms. So, the journey isn't that dangerous anymore, but still, it's quite an adventure, especially if you're seasick. If you don't feel like risking it but want to travel from the Pacific Ocean to the Atlantic Ocean by water the fast way, the Panama Canal is waiting for you. People first started thinking about making a water path across Panama in the 16th century. Back then, a Spanish explorer found out that only a thin piece of land separated the two oceans. But it seemed impossible to build it because of the mountains and thick jungle, so the idea had to wait a couple of centuries. Finally, in 1880, France, led by the man who built the Suez Canal in Egypt, tried to make the canal. But the people who started the construction soon found out it was much harder than it looked on a map. The land in Panama was one of the toughest and most dangerous places to dig a big waterway, Workers had to literally move huge mountains in a jungle full of snakes, where it was really hot and rainy. During the wet season, heavy rain turned rivers into wild rapids and soaked the workers. Sometimes, they didn't see the sun for 2 weeks, and their clothes stayed wet all the time. Big rocks were falling, and tiny mosquitoes that carried malaria made people very sick. And then, an earthquake happened on top of everything. They were losing thousands of people. That's why France decided to abandon the project after 7 years. Then, the United States bought the French assets in the canal zone and finished it by 1914. It cost the US around $375 million. The 50-mile-long passage of water saves ships traveling between New York and San Francisco 7,872 miles. Around 14,000 ships use it every year and pay around $1.8 million in tolls. So it looks like it all paid off. Another challenging waterway in this part of the world is the Amazon River. It's around 4,300 miles long and flows through 3 countries with over 30 million people living in its basin. But there isn't a single bridge across it. The river has many marshes and soft soils, so engineers would need to build very long bridges and very deep foundations, which costs a lot of money. Building bridges over deep water is tough, but in other places in the world, engineers can use things like floating platforms to help. The river's path and water levels change a lot during the year. During the dry season from June to November, the river is usually 2 to 6 miles wide. But in the wet season from December to April, the river can become as wide as 30 miles. And the water level can rise by 50 feet. That's why they can't build floating bridges or pontoons. The riverbanks are made of soft dirt that moves and erodes with the seasons, and it makes things even harder. It would have to be an absolutely unique project to overcome all these challenges. Luckily, there's no pressing need for a bridge across the Amazon right now. The river mostly goes through areas that are sparsely populated, so there aren't so many major roads to be connected by bridges.
Most rivers in the world flow into the sea, but the Okavango in Africa takes its massive waters right into the Kalahari Desert. And it looks like this river manages to do the impossible and defies gravity. The Okavango starts in the highlands of Angola, runs for 1,000 miles like any other normal river, and then drops into the largest inland delta on Earth, known as the Okavango Swamp. The delta has land slopes dropping at nearly 150 feet, which is about half as tall as the Statue of Liberty. The area where the Okavango Delta is now used to be part of a lake that dried up around 2,000 years ago. It takes the Okavango water several months to complete its journey, and the landscape there is never the same. The first European to have found the delta was the Scottish explorer David Livingstone. Yeah, the Dr. Livingstone, I presume, guy? That's him. When he first saw it, he was shocked as he noticed that the water seemed to be flowing backward and even uphill. He saw 2 strong watercourses connecting the Okavango to the wetland systems to the east. Decades later, other explorers saw them completely dry. Several years later, the watercourses were full again, and they kept emptying and filling up, sometimes changing direction. Scientists managed to explain this mystery when they found a hidden network of faults, part of the Great Rift Valley, under the sand. When major earthquakes happen, like the one in Indonesia in 2004, the Earth sets off a chain reaction. Tiny cracks underground shift just enough to send a trickle of water down the river, and a flood begins, raising the water levels. Plus, in May and June, when winter begins in the southern hemisphere, floods bring more fresh water and life to the swamp. Islands get submerged completely during the peak floods and then resurface again at the end of the wet season. Wildlife just loves all the water in the delta, and you can often see migratory elephants bathing among pink lily pads and silverfish, bream, barbels, and other fish. There are lions, cheetahs, buffalo, wildebeests, hippopotamuses, hippopotami, zebras, wild dogs, crocodiles, and other species of animals. Storks, ibis, Herons, cranes, and geese like to fly by, along with 450 species of birds. Although the Okavango has plenty of water that is priceless in the desert, people hardly settle along its banks. One big problem here is the tsetse fly, but if you're feeling adventurous, you can come here for a water safari. Scientists from Imperial College in London stumbled upon a totally unexpected river under the Antarctic ice sheet. It slurps up water from an area as big as Germany and France combined. Scientists used to think the lakes under the Antarctic ice were just chilling by themselves, but now it turns out they're part of an interconnected river network. Water under the ice can form in two ways, either from melted snow seeping down or from the Earth's natural heat and the ice grinding over the ground. The Antarctic gets a lot of surface melting during the summer, but Antarctica is usually too chilly for that. This newly found river is proof that there's plenty of water down there just from the ice melting from below. This river could make Antarctica lose its icy cover way faster. If things heat up enough to melt the surface, that water could rush down and mess with the base of the ice sheet, turning Antarctica into a melting mess like Greenland. If the ice starts moving faster than the water can handle, it's going to create more friction, making even more water and speeding up the melting process. The researchers are on a mission to dig deeper into how this river system works and see if it's causing trouble in other parts of the icy continent. Understanding what's going on down there could give us a heads up on how a changing Antarctica might shake up the whole planet. The Roe River in Montana flows for just a bit over 200 feet between Giant Springs and the Missouri River. It was mentioned in the Guinness Book of World Records as the shortest river in the world, but they had to remove this category altogether because there was some heated debate over this title. Residents of Oregon claim that their D River was the absolute champion, as it all depends on when you measure them. There could even be shorter rivers in Norway or Indonesia, depending on what you see as a river. The official definition says it's something that has constant flowing water in the form of a current and is fed by upland sources or another river, lake, or watershed. Creeks and brooks flow together to form streams. Streams become rivers, and rivers take the water from higher to lower lands, ending in the ocean. There are 12 stream orders, and the first two levels don't have other streams feeding them. So, Roe and its other short buddies technically deserve the title of rivers. I'm glad we cleared that up. Rio Negro in South America is the largest blackwater river in the world and the largest left tributary of the Amazon jungle. Its waters look more like strong tea and seem pitch black only from the distance. They get that dark color from humic acid. When plants containing phenol break down only halfway, they leave behind this tea-like hue. Some people believe that blackwater rivers can't be productive, but Rio Negro helps big fishing industries and has spots where turtles come to lay their eggs. Back in the 17th century, explorers didn't find tons of indigenous folks along the river. But it probably didn't have to do with its productivity, more with diseases and conflicts. There are around 700 different fish species documented in Rio Negro's basin, including at least 100 you won't find anywhere else. A bunch of those fish end up in aquariums, like the super popular cardinal tetra. There is a canal connecting Rio Negro and the Orinoco, which is another major river in South America. Many aquatic species try to move between the rivers, but only the toughest can handle the mix of blackwater and clearwater sections in that canal. There's a unique creek in Wyoming that drains both into the Pacific and the Atlantic Oceans. It begins high up in the Teton Range and later splits into two branches. The Pacific Creek joins the larger Snake River, which merges with the Columbia River and finally reaches the Pacific Ocean. The Atlantic Creek heads east and flows into the Yellowstone, Missouri, and Mississippi rivers and eventually empties into the Gulf of Mexico. If you connect the two creeks' watersheds on a map, you'll get a single blue line between Oregon and Louisiana. Explorers who were looking for the Northwest Passage between the two oceans never knew they could have used the creek. They would just need really tiny boats. Some scientists believe that cutthroat trout knew about this route long before people. They managed to migrate from the Snake River to the Yellowstone River, most likely using the two-ocean creek. Now, every summer, the Caño Cristales in Colombia turns into a liquid rainbow, or the River of Five Colors. At this time, and until the end of fall, the conditions are just perfect for the riverbed to turn bright red, yellow, green, blue, and black. You gotta thank certain aquatic plants growing in the river, a special type of seaweed for all this beauty. During the wet season, the river moves fast, and the sun cannot get to these plants. When the dry season hits, there isn't enough water to feed them. So, the time in between the seasons has the perfect conditions for this colorful show. No other place in the world has anything similar. So, at some point, the number of tourists who wanted to see it became so huge that scientists got concerned it could be bad for this hotspot of biodiversity. The area is home to rare species of animals, birds, and plants. Now, there are ecotourism trails and strict opening hours for visitors. Back in 2018, the biggest active underwater eruption ever happened, at least the one that we could officially record. Scientists followed earthquakes that struck the area in the western Indian Ocean off Madagascar. Between 2018 and 2021, over 11,000 earthquakes struck a small island called Mayan between Madagascar and Mozambique. The strongest one had a magnitude of 5.9. Until then, this area had been pretty peaceful. There had only been 2 earthquakes recorded over 50 years. Along with regular earthquakes, there were also some unusual seismic hums, like earthquakes at pretty low frequencies, forming deep underground. People couldn't feel those hums at the surface, but researchers around the world discovered them and realized they were related to volcanic activity no one actually noticed coming. Something strange happened. That underwater eruption created a giant skyscraper-sized volcano. This new underwater volcano turned out to be around 1.5 times the height of One World Trade Center in New York, and almost 10 times bigger than the Statue of Liberty. The area where it appeared had been explored in 2014, but it was almost flat, peaceful, and empty back then. Now, there is an actual volcano nearly 8,500 feet below sea level. The volcano gets its magma from a super profound reservoir located nearly 34 miles underground. It's the deepest reservoir of volcanic magma that we know about. The Earth has layers, and the middle one is kinda chunky. It's very much like peanut caramel filling many chocolates have. Research shows there are probably hunks of oceanic crust deep inside the Earth's liquid mantle. They're stuck there, creating large lumps in something that was supposed to be a smooth layer. Our planet has a rigid outer layer. It includes a hot upper mantle and cracked crust. The hot mantle moves and churns all the time, making the crust at the surface move too. This way, the oceanic crust dives into the depths and makes huge magma plumes go up toward the planet's surface. Scientists even found an ancient piece of the Pacific Ocean hundreds of miles underneath China. Those are the old remains of the Pacific seabed from long ago, and they were pulled downward below Earth's surface into the mantle transition zone. This rocky slab that used to be at the bottom of the ocean is made of the crust and some solid parts of the upper mantle. Most of the volcanic activity on our planet happens where we don't even see it, under the surface of the ocean. About 70% of all volcanic activity happens in the oceans, and mostly in the area of the South Pacific, with over 1,100 volcanoes squeezed into that area. Coastal cliffs, mountain changes, soils, and sediments that line valleys. These are only a small portion of the rocks on our planet. Oceans hide so much more deep down below the Earth's surface. In between the Earth's surface and its core is the mantle. It's a warm, thick layer of rock that moves and flows constantly. Some hundreds of miles below, there's a place where diamonds grow. As they form, they go through high temperatures and pressure, after which they eventually freeze. That way, when they arrive at the surface, scientists can explore their structure, find out how they formed, and understand better what's going on in the depths of our planet. Thanks to diamonds, they realized the mantle was very wet, and it possibly contained much more water than all the oceans on Earth. Our planet is eating up its own oceans. As its tectonic plates move, dive, and go beneath one another, They drag huge amounts of water into the Earth's interior. The water beneath the surface of our planet can help with developing magma and lubricate faults, which actually makes earthquakes more likely to happen. Water is actually stored in the minerals. It gets incorporated into the planet's crust when new oceanic plates form. They go through the process of bending and cracking as they grind under other plates, and huge amounts of water then go deep into the crust and mantle. Scientists research an area that's 18 miles under the surface. They realize these zones pull 3 billion teragrams, which is more than 2 billion pounds. Any ocean is like a whole new world. There are incredible sceneries below the surface, magnificent waterfalls, lakes, and rivers. There are thick layers of salt beneath the seafloor, and rivers and lakes form because seawater goes through those layers and dissolves them, creating something that resembles pools. The dissolved salt makes the surrounding water denser. That water then settles there, which eventually forms underwater lakes or rivers. But there are also mountain chains, trenches, canyons. There's a canyon in the Bering Sea with more than 8,500 feet of vertical relief. This makes the Grand Canyon look way smaller than it is, since the underwater canyon is nearly 2,500 feet deeper. Deep parts of the ocean are really cold. The temperature of the water can be about 40 degrees, but at the bottom, water can get boiling hot. There are hydrothermal vents in the seafloor. Those are the hot springs located at the edges of tectonic plates. The water they release can reach a temperature of up to 750 degrees Fahrenheit, but the pressure at such depths is very intense. So intense, no human being can handle it. Still, it's the pressure that keeps the water from boiling. Ocean depth is on average 2.3 miles. Light waves can still enter at 3,280 feet, even though it's in a very small amount. So all the mysteries hidden below that point remain in total darkness. The actual illuminated part of the ocean goes until 600 feet. Even though the sun gives us light, most of our planet is dark all the time. It's all because of the oceans, covering over 70% of our planet. The loudest sound that came from an ocean, and of the loudest sounds ever recorded, came from an ice quake. It was so loud, researchers picked it up by sensors more than 3,000 miles away. There was a seismic activity that made frozen ground break down. The Antarctic ice sheet is bigger than the continental part of the United States and Mexico together. A big iceberg from Antarctica holds over 20 billion gallons of water, which could make a 5-year water supply for 1 million people. Humans can generally drink sea ice, although we can't drink sea water. As time goes by and the ice ages, the brine trapped between ice crystals drains out. That way, ice becomes fresh enough to consume it. If all the ice sheets and glaciers we have on the Earth melted at the same time, the sea level would rise another 260 feet, which is just a little shorter than the Statue of Liberty, the height of a 26-story building. Clams live long enough to tell us more about oceans past. Ancient mollusks can live for more than 500 years. To learn more about a tree, you can use its rings to see how old it is. To learn how old a mollusk is, you can examine its rings within the shell and tell. This is also how scientists get information about the ocean, climate, and whatsoever. Clams can help take a look at what happened about 1,000 years ago. The Earth doesn't have 4 but 5 oceans now. The new one, called the Southern Ocean, was officially recognized only a few months ago. It borders the Atlantic, Pacific, and Indian Oceans, so scientists couldn't agree if it's really a new ocean or just part of the colder regions of these 3. We don't only divide oceans on maps. Each has different conditions for unique marine species. For example, the Southern Ocean has leopard seals, orcas, minke whales, emperor penguins, and other animals that live in cold, icy seas. It's also home to krill, small creatures that look like shrimp and are food for many bigger animals that live there. Life on our planet started about 3.5 billion years ago. I wasn't around then. It's still a mystery how and when exactly, but some theories say life could have first emerged in the depths of the ocean. A few years ago, scientists found microscopic tubes and filaments within rocks formed about 4 billion years ago. These rocks are fragments of ancient oceanic crust. Also, these tiny tubes and filaments are similar to microbes that can still be found on hydrothermal vents in deep parts of the ocean. The idea is these living cells found conditions to stay alive in tiny rocky pores inside the chimneys of those vents and started the amazing adventure of the evolution of life on our planet. So, contrary to popular belief, labeling the Nile as the longest river in the world might be a misconception. The measurement of a river's length entails more than simply calculating the distance between its starting point and end point. Rivers are intricate systems comprised of various tributaries, which significantly impact their overall length. In fact, when accounting for these tributaries, the initial figure can increase up to threefold, exemplified by the Mississippi River. From its origin in Itasca to its conclusion in New Orleans, the measurement suggests one length. However, the inclusion of the Missouri River alters this perception entirely. This discrepancy has fueled ongoing debates regarding the Nile's length compared to that of the Amazon River. Despite Google's recognition of the Nile as the longest river worldwide, it may not fully align with the factual reality. That's a nice way to put it. To comprehend this concept, envision rivers as the veins within a human body. It would be inaccurate to assume that a 6-foot-tall individual only has 6 feet of veins, right? Veins intricately weave throughout the entire body, much like a vast network. Rivers operate under the same principle, and the length of the main river is not the sole consideration. The extensive network of tributaries holds equal importance. Meanwhile, atmospheric rivers are fascinating meteorological occurrences, characterized by air currents that transport incredible amounts of water vapor all the way from the Amazon rainforest in northern South America to as far as northern Argentina. These airborne highways serve as essential conduits for the life-giving moisture carried by these airborne rivers, and their influence extends across Brazil's central west, southeast, and south regions, shaping the waterfall patterns in these areas. When these ethereal rivers converge with specific weather conditions, such as a cold front, the latent humidity they bear can transform into much-needed rainfall. This precipitation plays a vital role not only in sustaining the diverse ecosystems of the region, but also supporting Brazil's thriving economy in multiple ways. The significance of this phenomenon is evident as it enables the irrigation of crops, ensuring agricultural productivity and food security. Additionally, it replenishes local rivers, keeping the water flow steady and supporting aquatic life. Moreover, the water collected by these rivers is channeled into dam reservoirs, providing a reliable source of energy for the nation. The amount of water carried by the airborne rivers may match or even surpass the enormity of the Amazon's flow. Thus, when we unite the conventional Amazon River with its aerial counterpart, it becomes significantly larger than the Nile. Atmospheric rivers are also observed in the Congo Basin, where the climate is predominantly shaped by the moisture emanating from the Atlantic Ocean and the forests of the Congo Basin. This incredible phenomenon leads to evaporation levels as high as 3 to 6 feet of water per year. These rivers vary in size and strength, but on average, they transport a water vapor volume comparable to the flow at the mouth of the Mississippi River. In rare cases, exceptionally powerful atmospheric rivers can carry up to 15 times that amount. When these rivers reach land, they release the accumulated water vapor, resulting in rainfall or snowfall. Although atmospheric rivers come in various forms, those with high water vapor content and intense winds can cause extreme precipitation and flooding, especially when they linger over flood-prone watersheds. An example of a well-known atmospheric river is the Pineapple Express, a robust system capable of transporting moisture from the tropical regions near Hawaii to the U.S. West Coast. Such events can disrupt travel, trigger mudslides, and lead to significant destruction of life and property. However, not all atmospheric rivers pose risks. Many are weaker systems that provide valuable rain or snow, essential for maintaining water supplies. Plus, they play a critical role in the global water cycle and have a close association with water supply and flood hazards, particularly in the western United States. In addition for the potential for flooding, atmospheric rivers also contribute to desirable increases in snowpack. A series of atmospheric rivers was responsible for severe winter storms that battered the U.S. West Coast from western Washington to southern California between 2010 and just recently in early 2024, resulting in rainfall ranging from 11 to 25 inches in certain regions. So, if water vapor can be considered a river, it begs the question, what else can be classified as a river? Surprisingly, even without any water, something can still be deemed a river. This fascinating phenomenon is known as a wadi, traditionally referring to a river valley. Wadis can be found in gently sloping, almost flat areas of deserts. Unlike traditional rivers, wadis lack permanent channels due to the sporadic presence of water flow. As a result, they exhibit braided stream patterns caused by limited water supply and an abundance of sediments. The water that does manage to reach the stream bed percolates down, causing a sudden decrease in energy and significant deposition. Additionally, wadis can develop sediment dams, altering stream patterns during subsequent flash floods. Interestingly, wind also plays a role in sediment deposition within wadis. When wadi sediments are submerged or moist, wind-driven sediments settle on top of them, resulting in a mixture of both water and wind sediments. Rivers can be peculiar not just because they consist of sand or air, but also because of their fascinating coverings. In certain conditions, Scotland's River Dee reveals an intriguing sight: peculiar frozen formations that resemble lily pads. These formations, called ice pancakes or pancake ice, occur naturally when gentle waves cause smooth pieces of ice to collide, resulting in smooth rounded edges. As these ice disks interact with the waves, they gain raised edges, giving them an appearance reminiscent of lily pads. Usually, pancake ice has a somewhat slush-like consistency. Some media reports have suggested that the ice on the River Dee formed from frozen foam. But scientists explain that while it is plausible, the pancake ice still develops through the collision process. Over time, these ice pancakes often merge together, forming large sheets of ice. If the ice becomes thick enough and the water remains turbulent, it can bend, fracture, and stack upon itself, creating remarkable structures called ice ridges. Now, imagine a river not made of water but of methane. It may sound like an outlandish idea, but on Saturn's moon Titan, this is actually a reality. Vid Flamina, a fascinating river on Titan, consists of liquid methane and ethane and has drawn comparisons to the mighty Nile. Stretching over 249 miles, it gracefully flows into Ligeia Mare, which is Titan's second-largest hydrocarbon sea. While most of Titan's surface is composed of water ice, Vid Flamina stands out as a breathtaking river that carves canyons into the icy terrain, mimicking solid bedrock. NASA scientists believe that this extraordinary river hosts rapids, whirlpools, and even waterfalls, mirroring the features found in Earth's rivers. When NASA's Cassini probe reached Saturn in 2004, its main goal was to explore this giant planet and its moons. Scientists were particularly interested in finding evidence of liquid methane on Titan due to its unique surface temperature and methane-rich atmosphere. However, initial observations from Cassini concentrated on Titan's equatorial region, disappointed the researchers as they found no signs of seas or rivers. But this disappointment turned into excitement when Cassini's orbit shifted, enabling the team to focus on other areas of Titan's surface using radar techniques. Surprisingly, radar signals bounced off various angled and rough features such as sand dunes, cliffs, and rocks. But when the radar reached Titan's polar regions, the signal ceased, revealing mysterious dark spots resembling lakes, rivers, and tributaries akin to those found on Earth. The groundbreaking discovery came in December 2012 when Yanni Radabau, a scientist working with Cassini's team, announced an image captured in September of the same year. The image unveiled a river resembling the Nile, extending over 200 miles in a relatively straight course, indicating a correlation with fault lines similar to other significant rivers nearby. This remarkable flowing body navigates through rugged and inclined terrain, suggesting the occurrence of tectonic processes comparable to those on Earth.
More than 1 million Earths can fit in our Sun. New research shows that between 20% to 35% of suns eat their own planets, and a quarter of planetary systems orbiting stars like the Sun had a chaotic past. The very thing that gives life can also take it away. All the planets in our solar system revolve around the Sun, and they all do it in a somewhat consistent way. It's most likely that they stayed that way ever since they first came into the picture, but not all of them. This chaotic existence means that a solar system had a lot of planets in the litter until the host sun decided to melt them away. Our solar system is panned out perfectly so that no planet's gravity interferes with each other. The gravitational force on Jupiter is a lot tougher than Earth's, which means that if Earth gets close to Jupiter, we'd be another moon for Jupiter. The planet is so big that if Earth were the size of a grape, Jupiter would be the size of a basketball compared to it. Even with the best technology in the world, it's difficult to tell if stars do, in fact, eat their planets. The best way to study this is to observe binary systems. That's just a sciencey way of saying a system with two stars orbiting each other. Usually, the two stars were formed around the same time from the same gases and the same conditions. It means they should contain the same elements, more or less. When you open your eyes in the morning, the sunlight that's been traveling for millions of miles greets you. The closer we get to it, the hotter it is. But the rays traveling from the sun also contain certain chemicals that make it unique. The chemicals that are associated with the sun are light materials like oxygen, carbon, hydrogen, and helium. You can find some other stuff in it too, but these are the main ones. By studying these elements, you can learn the history of a solar system with enough detail to determine if it was chaotic or smooth. Scientists studied 107 binary systems composed of suns like ours by analyzing the light. Since each system contains two suns, they compared and contrasted them to see the differences. They observed the stars with a thin outer layer, having different elements than their companion. All suns contain light elements, but there are some that have rocky elements, like iron, silicon, and titanium near the sun. These elements are associated with rough terrains that you'd find on the surface, but they're out there floating in the middle of space. The thinnest outer layer is especially rich in iron compared to the other layers. Many stars are twins at birth. Even most of the Milky Way stars have a buddy in a binary system. It means our sun is pretty unique for not having a partner. But there are some theories out there that suggest that the sun may have lost its twin in the past. It's around 184 light-years away and is called HD 186302. This might be our lucky star. A stellar nursery is where thousands of stars are born. They're made up of gas and dust that gradually collapse under their own weight. Our sun may have started in such a way 4.6 billion years ago. And when they're mature enough, they go out into the open, usually with their travel buddy. Actually, scientists claim that up to 85% of all stars could be in binary pairs or have more buddies, but over 50% are dual pairs. The only problem is that we can't really see it, since it strayed from its original orbit an eternity ago. But traces of it can be found in the Oort cloud. That's the vast cluster of space consisting of comets, space rocks, and ice in the outer edges of our sun's reach. They float around quite a lot, since they're far off the sun's gravity and can easily be knocked out of their orbit into open space. Flying through such a space is no different than flying through any random void of space. The reason why some of these light elements in space contain rock elements you'd find on the surface of a planet is because the sun knocked them off their orbit and devoured them as they got closer. It also happens when a star becomes too big in its place and starts eating everything around it. According to scientists, if a star eats a planet, it can make it go chaotic and spin so quickly that it eventually rips apart. But don't worry, there's a very low chance of the sun devouring the planet in the near future. Stars are formed when a huge cloud of hydrogen and helium grows until it collapses under its own weight. The pressure increases and reaches extreme heat levels we can't even measure. Eventually, the hydrogen atoms lose their electrons, causing the hydrogen to fuse together and release energy, countering the gravity collapsing. But when the gravitational force overpowers the hydrogen fusion, the star begins to expand and becomes a red giant. And then, after around 1 billion years, the hydrogen in the outer core will go away, leaving plenty of helium hanging around, which will fuse with the rest of the elements around. And once all the helium disappears, gravity will shrink the red giant into a white dwarf. And when it's completely gone, the remains of the star release tons of gas and dust into space. Scientists claim that our sun has between 7 to 8 billion years left before it reaches that stage. But even if that becomes a reality, it wouldn't happen overnight. Something like this takes millions of years to take place. But what if the sun decided to devour us overnight as we speak? The planet would start feeling hot in seconds. Every slight degree change can lead to some catastrophic events. Ice caps can melt in a matter of seconds and flood the coastal lands. Even little islands in remote areas of the world will be submerged. And as it gets hotter, every snow-capped area will melt instantly and turn into desert-like climates. Some places will burn, and your everyday objects will melt on the spot. The Earth's interior will also get hotter, allowing volcanic eruptions to happen across the world. Antarctica will melt from the heat, as well as the volcanoes erupting inside. And just in a matter of minutes, the whole planet will turn into fire and ash before it explodes into tiny bits floating in space, reaching areas we've never even heard of. But no worries, something like this won't really happen. In case the sun knocks us off our rotation, the results would be different. It'll also get hot because the magnetic field around us protects us from the sun's radiation. And once we get knocked out of place, the magnetic field gets tarnished, and the extreme heat from the sun will boil us. The gravitational force will be unstable, so the physics of our everyday life will be chaotic. We'll have to wait 5 billion years from now when the sun turns into a red giant. It'll grow in size, eventually eating up Mercury and Venus. Chances are, Earth will also be on the menu. If Earth were to move only 900,000 miles closer to the sun, then it would be uninhabitable. It may seem like a lot, but it's only 4 times the distance between the Moon and Earth. Detecting the chemical composition of the sun rays in solar systems that are further away could help scientists find other Earth-like planets. Since the atmosphere around these planet-eating stars changes the chemical composition, we can detect which solar systems out there have had a calm past. The main thing we have to observe is if the planets have a healthy orbit cycle. With nothing else getting in the way, we can assume that the planet could follow the same steps as Earth did for humans to be here. But this process will take ages, since there are millions of nearby stars similar to our Sun. The odds of finding a planet similar to ours are near impossible at this rate. But if so, then there might be life on those planets. There will be no way of knowing if it's intelligent life, but they might have had the same evolutionary fate as us.
Oh wow, there's a hole in the bottom of the ocean. It seems that the ocean has a leak. But it's not like a leak you would expect, where water is flowing out. It's more like a spring since water is flowing in, not out. This unique leak is something we know as Pythia's oasis. A grad student was the one who accidentally discovered it. He noticed bubbles that were rising to the surface. Normally, bubbles in the ocean tell us there might be some hydrothermal vents, which are hotspots for some pretty cool things. These vents are actually like hot springs on the seafloor, but instead of bubbling with warm water, they release a fluid that has been superheated in the crust of our planet. When seawater seeps into these cracks and travels deep into the crust, it comes into contact with the extremely hot mantle. This heats seawater to very high temperatures, and as it moves back up towards the surface, it carries dissolved gases and minerals. When the hot fluid shoots out of the vents, it mixes with the surrounding seawater and quickly cools down. Just a short distance away from the vent, the temperature can drop to a comfortable 68 degrees Fahrenheit or so, which is, as it seems, exactly what some creatures like. And there are some real weirdos living down there in the darkness, like ghostly fish, giant red-tipped tube worms, and a unique type of shrimp with eyes on their back. And some of them, like tube worms and bacteria, rely on the chemicals and minerals released by the vents to survive in harsh conditions. But in this case, the bubbling water didn't come from a hydrothermal vent. It was there because of a spring, and that's a bit more concerning. You see, the water in this reservoir needs to stay where it is. If too much of it seeps out, there could be some serious consequences, especially for the surrounding area. You can see this unusual leak along the Cascadia subduction zone, which is a massive fault line off the Pacific Northwest coast. It's a place where two pretty big plates that make up Earth's crust come together and slide along each other. The water from Pythia's oasis kinda acts as a lubricant between these plates. You can think of the fault zone as an air hockey table. When the fluid pressure is high, it's like you've turned the air on. That means the friction between the plates is reduced, which allows the plates to move. But if the fluid pressure is lower, the two plates can lock together, which then leads to the buildup of stress. Not that they'll feel bad. In the context of tectonic plates, stress is some pressure or force that can cause deformation. And if this stress starts to build up, at some point, it's gotta go somewhere. When it's too much, it can trigger earthquakes, and most likely, not small ones. For example, a release of stress in the Cascadia subduction zone could lead to a magnitude 9 earthquake. For comparison, the biggest earthquake we've ever recorded happened in Chile in 1960, and it had a magnitude of 9.5. The damage was enormous. So we hope the water will stay in its reservoir and keep maintaining the delicate balance between the tectonic plates. We've explored only 5% of the ocean. Who knows how many cool things are there at the bottom, waiting to be found? For example, check out these mysterious holes scientists have stumbled upon in the depths of the Atlantic Ocean, near the Azores. They're neatly aligned and are about 4 inches apart, or in some cases, even several feet. They resemble punctures left by a sewing machine. Some think these holes could have a biological origin. For instance, some fish may have made them while walking along the seafloor. Others believe we could be looking at something that's human-made, maybe left by a spiked tire. Of course, such holes are perfect for making up stories about creatures from other planets who allegedly made them. Or maybe even legendary monsters, like that one from Loch Ness. It's definitely hard to explain such symmetry of the holes, but one deep-sea biologist offered a pretty good explanation. He said there could be an animal burrowing beneath the sediment, and from time to time, it could make little chimneys just to get access to clean water circulation in its small burrow. I mean, there are sediment piles around the opening of each hole, and they do support the idea that something pushed the soil from below. But there's still no proof these holes are actually connected beneath the surface. And there are also a lot of things hidden at the bottom of the oceans and seas that ancient civilizations left us. For instance, archaeologists made a really cool discovery off the southern coast of Croatia, a road hidden under layers of sea mud that's 7,000 years old. They found the ancient road at the sunken Neolithic site of Solin. The site of Solin was a human-made island in ancient times, and an archaeologist discovered it 2 years ago. He was studying satellite images of the area around Korčula, one of the beautiful Croatian islands. When he realized there could be something interesting at the bottom of the sea, he dove into the water with his colleague. And under the surface of the Adriatic Sea, which is part of the Mediterranean Sea, at a depth of 13 to 16 feet, they found stone walls that were most likely part of some ancient settlement. The landmass where people built the settlement was separated from the main island by a narrow stretch of land. Luckily, this area is protected from big waves by the surrounding islands, so the site remained relatively well preserved. It's now hidden beneath the surface of the sea and covered in mud. But it's so exciting to imagine how people walked on that road nearly 7,000 years ago, visiting nearby settlements. If you want to see the weirdest creatures, you can always head to the bottom of the sea. Actually, scientists have determined there could be more than 30 potentially new species at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. They've collected them using their remote-controlled vehicle. That's a big step because until recently, they could only study such creatures through photographs. I'm talking about segmented worms, different types of coral, some invertebrates similar to centipedes, and many others. But there are also many old freaky creatures that we already know about that look like they came from sci-fi movies. Red octopus, blobfish. Okay, this one kinda looks normal until you raise it to the surface. The goblin shark, Sloane's viperfish, zombie worms. Ugh. Yeah, I hear ya. Let's move on. The seafloor hides things from space too. There are traces of rare forms of plutonium and iron at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. And what's awesome is that all this has come from space. These radioactive materials probably formed during some kind of cataclysmic event in space and eventually made their way out to our beautiful home planet. And this extraterrestrial debris most likely appeared on Earth within the past 10 million years. After it fell to the Pacific Ocean and settled at a depth of almost a mile, it became part of all those layers of rock down there. Plutonium is especially exciting for scientists. I mean, only tiny amounts of it have been found. Hundreds of atoms maybe. But it's still remarkable because these atoms are created by exploding stars. Things like this can help us better understand how the universe produces elements heavier than iron, like plutonium, gold, uranium, and platinum. We're still not sure about the origins of these elements. For a long time, scientists believed that supernovae, which is when a star comes to its end in a fabulous explosion, were responsible for creating these heavy elements. But it seems it's not just that. Some other cosmic events, such as the collision of neutron stars, which are super dense collapsed stars, or some rare types of supernovae, could also be involved. Whoa, let me get my popcorn.
Let me take you to a place that seems to be out of this world. Life inside this cave has been isolated from the outside world for about 5.5 million years, and it does show. See for yourself. Due to such a long isolation, the conditions inside the Mobile Cave are like nowhere else on our planet. A unique ecosystem is flourishing there, even though there is a severe lack of sunlight inside the cave, and the air is toxic. The cave, located a few miles west of the Black Sea in Romania, was first discovered in 1986. Nowadays, you can only visit it if you have special permission. Plus, the central caverns are guarded naturally by narrow limestone tunnels and vertical shafts. So, if you're no stranger to claustrophobia, you'd probably better not enter this place. In the depth of the cave, the air has twice less oxygen than the air outside. Instead, it contains a lot of carbon dioxide and hydrogen sulfide, so not the freshest air you can breathe. It's also pitch black inside the cavern. But despite, or should I say thanks to, this cocktail of extremely harsh conditions, the site is a true goldmine for biologists. Shockingly, life seems to be booming here. In a 1996 study, scientists identified 48 species, and 33 of them were unique to the cave. Most of the creatures inhabiting the cave are tiny, with long limbs and antennae that help them navigate in the dark. They have no vision and lack pigment, and it makes sense. Why would you need to be able to see if you live in total darkness? And why would you need to be pretty and colorful with no one to see you? Now, I'm going to take you to another cave. It's no less amazing, but looks very different. This is the Giant Crystal Cave, aka the Cave of the Crystals, in Mexico. These ginormous crystals were found in 2000 by a mining company after the water was pumped out of the cave. Two miners then saw the crystals after entering the drying cave on foot. These awe-inspiring crystals are actually massive gypsum pillars hidden 984 feet underground. They're anchored to the walls and the floor of the scorching hot cave. Scientists estimate that the crystals could have been already growing for 500,000 years. That's why many of them are so long and wide that you can walk across them. Unfortunately, visiting this wonder of nature is impossible at the moment. But maybe it's for the better, since the Giant Crystal Cave is a dangerous place that can easily turn into a trap. For tens of thousands of years, it was filled with groundwater, which was originally pushed upward into the opening by a magma chamber located in the depths of our planet. The magma under the cave kept the water hot, but eventually the temperature of the water dipped below 136 degrees Fahrenheit. As a result, the water started to fill with calcium and sulfate, whose particles began to recombine into gypsum. And then, white-tinted crystals took over the cave. And since they stayed underwater, they were able to keep growing. You don't have to fly to space to take a closer look at a black hole. Scientists have found something very similar to black holes in the southern Atlantic Ocean. A black hole has such an enormous gravitational pull that once something gets pulled inside, it doesn't have any chance to escape. Even light can't get out of a black hole. But ocean black holes seem to be almost as powerful as their space relatives. But instead of catching the light, they do the same with water. Ocean eddies are massive whirlpools that spin against the main current. They usually swirl billions of tons of water, and most of them are larger than a city. These whirlpools are so powerful that nothing trapped by them can escape. But the scariest thing is that you might not even notice heading into one of them. These things are so huge that you won't spot their boundaries until it's too late. When scientists started exploring ocean vortices with the help of satellites, they discovered the borders of several eddies. After that, they managed to prove that, mathematically, these whirlpools are the same as mysterious black holes in space. Massive eddies are surrounded by super-tight barriers where fluid moves in closed loops. Even water can't get out from the inside of these loops. That's why tight ocean vortices play the role of enormous containers. Water inside them can be totally different from the ocean surrounding an eddy. And I'm not only talking about its temperature. The salt content inside and outside a whirlpool often differs as well. On the thin Curonian spit splitting the Baltic Sea from the Curonian Lagoon, there is one of the most bizarre places on Earth. Locals call this area the Dancing Forest because pine trees in this forest have shockingly unusual shapes. They twist in spirals and circles along the ground. There are some theories why it could be happening, of course. Some people claim that huge amounts of positive and negative energies once clashed in that spot. More down-to-earth individuals believe that the reason is geological. Sandy soil in the area is too unstable to hold trees growing upright. The most popular is the idea that strong winds blowing from the water influence the shape of the trees. In any case, experts haven't come to the final conclusion yet. Look at these underwater crop circles. For the first time, they were spotted in 1995, close to southern Japan's coast. Local divers called these 7-feet-wide structures mystery circles. The enigma had been plaguing many minds for almost 16 years until the culprit was finally caught. Imagine the researchers' surprise when it turned out to be a male pufferfish. The fish needs a bit more than a week to build one circle, and the aesthetics are obviously crucial. A male is swimming inside the circle, digging valleys in the sand with its fins. But that's not all. The fish also use shells and corals to decorate particular parts of their circles. This whole build-a-circle thing has a practical purpose as well. The way a male fish swims pushes the sand toward the center of the circle and creates a mound which later serves as a nest. The next mystery on our list is in the Caribbean. Just off the coast of Belize, there's a giant sinkhole. That's the Great Blue Hole. It's about 1,000 feet across and more than 400 feet deep. Once, a long, long time ago, this hole was a cave. But then rising waters filled it, making it collapse in on itself. The deeper you'll descend into the Great Hole's crystalline waters, the darker it will become. You'll see tons of stalactite-filled caves there, but entering them is extremely dangerous, unless you want to get hopelessly lost. Once you reach a depth of 50 feet, you'll notice that the water is shimmering. That's the invisible line dividing the sinkhole's salty top from the freshwater abyss. You might want to turn back right now. Who knows what you might come across in the murky depths. There was an old Amazonian legend that told about the river that was so hot that it boiled. And it was believed to be just a legend until Peruvian geoscientist Andres Russo questioned if the river could be real. All experts denied such a possibility. After all, hot rivers do exist, but only in the areas where there are volcanoes. As for the part of the country mentioned in the legend, there are no volcanoes in that region. But Andres Russo was too dedicated to give up. And in 2011, he finally located the river from the legends. The water in it was indeed steaming hot. Its temperature was 186 degrees Fahrenheit, not boiling, but pretty close to this point. But what shocked the researcher the most was the size of the river. One could think that the almost boiling water was the result of the activity of an underwater hot spring. But thermal pools are always small, while the river is 20 feet deep and flows for almost 4 miles. This is the only river of its kind on our planet.
On a sunny day, a man was diving in shallow waters near South Africa. At one point, he saw something that didn't catch his eye at first. A pile of shells that looked as if it had been put together. Maybe by some other diver, he must have told himself. But out of all these shells came the most unusual of creatures, an octopus. The gorgeous underwater animal looked straight at the man before swimming away. Impressed by his new acquaintance, the diver started visiting the octopus every day. He watched it use shells and seaweed to protect itself and learned how it hunted and cared for its eggs. All these encounters became the basis for a now famous documentary. In the movie, the diver wanted to study the relationship between a wild octopus and its observer. Initially, the octopus was a bit too shy to let the man get close. But over time, it began to trust him and even explored his body. At one point, the octopus even rested on the diver's chest. The man soon began to look at the underwater creature as his octopus friend. Sure, the documentary did make it look like a true friendship, but that was most likely because of all the close-ups and eerie music. But you can't really know what the octopus is thinking. Maybe what looks like tenderness is just curiosity or confusion. Maybe an apparent hug is really just a defense mechanism. Some people may love octopuses, but can they really be friends with a human? Until they learn to talk, I guess we'll never know. That doesn't make an octopus less of an interesting creature though. Apart from those quirky sets of tentacles, obviously, octopuses have another characteristic that sets them apart from other sea creatures. A recent study that involved studying the footage of octopuses living underwater shows that they sometimes develop this unusual behavior. They seem to throw things at each other on purpose. It can be anything from dirt from the bottom of the sea to shells or rocks. Octopuses are known to be solitary creatures, so when something or someone, like an underwater camera person, gets too close to them, they might lash out. Just as we have yet to discover the limits of our galaxies and constellations, we know very little about the bottom of the sea. It's one of the reasons why we find it so hard to explain the behavior of some underwater creatures. The truth is, we don't have good enough technology able to deal with harsh conditions and a limited amount of light underwater. You might have asked yourself at one point, what's the deepest part of the ocean? It's called the Mariana Trench. We don't really know exactly how deep this giant hole is, since it's too difficult to measure, but it's somewhere around 6.8 miles deep and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. This massive underwater trench was first studied back in 1875 with the help of a weighted rope. Back in 2012, a Canadian film director reached the bottom of the trench in a submersible vessel called the Deep Sea Challenger. Some of the most bizarre creatures on the planet were discovered here, including the Dumbo octopus, the sea cucumber, and the goblin shark. The Mariana Trench got its name from the nearby Mariana Islands, which were named Las Marianas in honor of Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria. The Mariana Trench might be the deepest part of the ocean that we know of. But one other mysterious phenomenon that's interesting for researchers is called phantom bottoms. In the late 1940s, when the sonar became standard equipment, ships and submarines noticed unexpected signals coming from the ocean. Those signals came from areas where no seafloor was supposed to exist. What's even more mysterious is that this fake seafloor appeared to move. One researcher at Scripps University found out that these phantom bottoms showing on maps were indeed alive. They were made out of a layer of jellyfish, shrimps, and other deep-sea creatures. The reason why they move is that they rise to the surface at night to feed. To top it all off, even the way these creatures move is kinda calculated. They don't just move randomly, but seem to gather together by species. We used to believe underwater animals behave this way only to avoid being caught by predators. It's a mystery to scientists why they group in the same way to form a fake seabed. Our curiosity about the deep waters doesn't stop at the seafloor. If you went on a vacation to the beach when you were young, you probably remember the fun of digging in the sand. As the hole got deeper, you may have asked yourself, could I dig all the way to the other side of the earth? None of us have ever found out. Our parents took us home when it got dark and chilly. Scientists are more reasonable when it comes to this subject. For starters, they know the best place to start digging would be underwater. since those regions are already deeper than what we can find on land. They also do not have the ambition to drill a tunnel through Earth. It's not even possible. That's mostly because of the extreme heat and pressure inside our planet. Even if we could technically dig a tunnel, it would not be safe to travel through it. However, reaching the mantle and retrieving a sample would be a huge scientific achievement, similar to landing on the moon. What we live on is called Earth's crust. Underneath it, there are other layers called the mantle, outer core, and inner core. Researchers have been trying to drill into Earth's mantle since the 1960s, but they haven't succeeded. Some failed due to technical issues, and others were unlucky and chose the wrong places to drill. Our planet's mantle is made of molten rock. Wouldn't that be dangerous if we ever reached it? Scientists say we have nothing to worry about, though. If and when the drillers eventually pierce through the crust underwater, hot molten rock won't pop up the hole and spill onto the seafloor like it would during a volcanic eruption. Mantle rocks aren't solid, sure, but they move slowly, at the same speed as your fingernails grow. Another of those famous deep-sea mysteries is that of the 1997 bloop. You heard that right. I'm talking about a weird sound that seemed to come from deep under the waves. People heard it in the South Pacific. No one had ever recounted a sound like that before. Some thought it must have been emitted by a strange creature living deep in the ocean. It didn't help that the noise came from a location mentioned in a story by famous writer H.P. Lovecraft. In his story, it was a creature called Cthulhu that lived there. In the novel, the author described it as a large, human-like monster with tentacles on its face and wings on its back. For many years, people tried to figure out where the noise came from. It wasn't until 2005 that they concluded it was from icebergs breaking off of glaciers. Some people still don't believe that this explanation truly makes sense and are searching for a different reason for the bloop. If creatures living outside of our planet ever decided to come to visit, you wouldn't expect them to go straight to the bottom of the sea, right? Well, some people claim there's a sort of spaceship on the ocean floor, discovered in 2011. It's basically an oval-shaped object located on the bottom of the Baltic Sea. In 2012, a team of divers explored the anomaly and found what appeared to be a staircase and other structures on its surface. This only added to the belief that the large object had been made by someone and wasn't just a natural phenomenon. Even more bizarre, close to the unidentified anomaly, the explorers' electrical equipment, like sonar instruments and satellite phones, started to malfunction. Some scientists believe it just to be a glacial deposit or some other natural formation, but they still don't know for sure what it is.
About 800,000 years ago, I wasn't around then, a gigantic asteroid soared through space and plummeted toward Earth. It slammed into our planet with enormous force. It blanketed 10% of Earth with shiny black and green lumps of rocky debris known as tektites. Tektites are pieces of rock that get liquefied by the heat of a meteorite impact. Then they cool down to look like dark, glassy pebbles. A trail of these tektites was strewn across Southeast Asia and reached all the way to eastern Antarctica. This is how scientists know this giant meteorite crash happened. Well, researchers spent nearly 100 years trying to find the gigantic crater caused by the impact. But tektites were too widespread. That's why they couldn't pinpoint the exact location. Until recently. A team of experts from different universities tried to discover the ground zero of the meteorite impact. They investigated several craters in China and Cambodia, but none seemed to be created by a meteorite crash. The experts then decided to investigate Laos. It's a country where they discovered the largest and most concentrated number of tektites. After ruling out all visible craters, the team came up with a new theory. What if the crater is hidden by something? In search of the potential crater, the scientists measured gravity readings at different locations all across Laos. At the site of an ancient volcanic eruption, below thick, dense layers of cooled volcanic lava, they discovered a severe gravitational anomaly. It turned out to be a large elongated crater, over 300 feet deep and spreading 8 miles wide and 11 miles long. Based on the location and the crater's enormous size, scientists believe this is the impact site of the ancient meteorite. Meanwhile, over 2 billion years ago, long before the age of dinosaurs, Earth was struck by one of the largest asteroids to ever hit our planet. The asteroid was approximately 6 to 9 miles across and created the biggest impact crater on Earth. This is the Vredefort crater. You can find it in present-day South Africa. When it was formed, it had a gigantic diameter of 186 miles. Over the centuries, the massive crater slowly eroded away into the Vredefort Dome. That's a rocky hill formation that was the central site of the asteroid's impact. This formation is so large that it can be seen from space. Today, the Vredefort Dome is a recognized World Heritage Site. It's also home to several towns and communities that encourage tourists to come and visit the ancient crater. In 1943, one pilot strayed from his regular flight path to avoid dangerous weather conditions. Flying over Quebec, Canada, he spotted a large, perfectly circular basin. That is how the Pingualuit crater was discovered. Around 1.4 million years ago, a meteorite hit this spot, creating this small but deep impact crater. It has a diameter of 2 miles and a depth of 1,300 feet. A lake of deep blue water has formed at the bottom of the crater. It's said that this lake contains some of the purest water in the world as it has no inlets or outlets. It means that the lake is only filled by rains and melting snow. The lake is home to one species of fish, the Arctic char. The Sudbury Basin is also in Canada. Formed over 1.8 billion years ago, it's one of the largest and oldest impact craters in the world. It's located in Ontario, but the impact from the collision was so powerful that debris from it was found 500 miles away in Minnesota. Unlike most impact craters that have a circular shape, the Sudbury Basin is an oval. It's 39 miles long with a width of 19 miles. The original impact site might have been a whopping 10 miles deep, but its modern-day version is much shallower. The asteroid that created the basin carried a high concentration of natural minerals. This made the soil in the crater incredibly fruitful. Today, its floor is home to numerous fruit and vegetable farms. The unique crater formation of Sudbury Basin was used to train Apollo astronauts before they embarked on their missions to the Moon. Perhaps the most famous meteorite of all is the Chicxulub. That's the meteorite responsible for wiping out 75% of all plant and animal life on Earth, including the dinosaurs. The Chicxulub meteorite had a diameter of 6 miles when it struck Earth 66 million years ago. The crater now lies off the coast of Mexico, hidden deep beneath the seabed. It's around 93 miles across and 12 miles in depth. Recently, scientists managed to drill deep down into the highest peak of the impact crater to collect rock samples. They discovered that the disappearance of dinosaurs wasn't caused by the giant size of the meteorite or the scale of the blast. It was because of the exact location where the Chicxulub hit Earth. The meteorite struck part of our planet that was densely filled with a mineral compound called gypsum. It's a soft sulfate mineral that is typically used as a fertilizer. The collision blasted so much sulfur into the air that it blocked out the sun. This caused the prolonged dark winter that doomed the dinosaurs. One of the youngest craters on Earth is the Barringer crater in Winslow, Arizona. The Barringer crater is also one of the best preserved craters on Earth. It was formed 50,000 years ago when a heavy meteorite made mostly of iron plummeted down from space. Earth's atmosphere barely slowed down the massive chunk of metal. It collided with the ground with incredible force. The meteorite vaporized upon impact, leaving very few remains. The crater left by this powerful explosion was named after the man who identified it in 1903. It was a mining engineer named Daniel Barringer. The diameter of the crater is 3,900 feet and it goes 560 feet deep. The Barringer family still owns the impact site to this day. You can visit the crater and take a guided tour around its rim. The Papagai crater in Siberia is one of the most interesting craters on Earth. An asteroid impact over 35 million years ago formed this massive basin. The crater is 62 miles across, which makes it the fourth largest one in the world. This crater is unique as it's home to one of the largest diamond deposits in the world. The intense pressure from the collision transformed the graphite at the impact site into diamonds. Scientists say that the crater contains trillions of carats of diamonds, but no one has ever mined them due to the site's remote location and lack of infrastructure. In the year 1530 BCE, a meteoroid entered Earth's atmosphere before shattering into pieces. The meteorite's burning fragments rained down on Earth and crashed into the planet's surface. As a result, a group of craters appeared on a small Estonian island, Saaremaa. The largest crater is a 360-foot wide perfect circle. It's 70 feet deep and filled with blue water. 8 smaller craters that appeared during the collision can be found within a half-mile radius of the largest crater. The impact of the meteorite fragments caused the trees on the islands to catch fire. Almost all forests burned down. Luckily, the woodlands have now grown back, and the craters are a popular hiking destination for tourists. A meteorite struck the area we now know as Quebec, Canada, around 200 million years ago. This collision created the 6th largest impact crater in the world. It had a diameter of 40 miles. Over the century, the outer rim of the crater has filled up with water. It's now known as Manicouagan Reservoir. The impact crater lake is so large it can be seen from space, and its strange shape gave the lake its nickname, the Eye of Quebec. The oldest meteorite crater in the world is in Western Australia. The Yarrabuba crater is 2.2 billion years old. Well, that gets my vote for the best crater name. The impact site is so ancient that the original crater has completely eroded away. Yarrabuba's diameter was around 19 to 43 miles. Scientists managed to figure out the age of the impact site by analyzing